pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
All right. May I have a motion, may I have a volunteer to read the mission statement, please? If anybody has it handy.
Delaware Valley School District, in partnership with our community, stands committed to maximizing student potential, fostering lifelong learning, and promoting responsible citizenship.
Thanks, Jess. All right. And before we move to the motion to adopt the agenda, I just want to thank everybody who's streaming in from YouTube. Unfortunately, because of the governor's latest orders, we weren't able to have the public here present, which we wanted originally, or which we were aiming for originally. So we are here in the DVHS auditorium, socially spaced out. And so I just want to thank everybody for streaming in tonight. And I apologize for the last minute change we had to make. So now may I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Is there any discussion? The one thing I want to change really quick is I want to slide Dr. Bell's presentation to after the approval, so that way we could have more fluidity in questions from the public with the board conversation, because since we have a relatively light agenda tonight. Is everybody okay with that? Good. All right, excellent. So all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Now, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held on June 18th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Oh, yep, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. We have no student representative reports, administrative reports, so we'll slide down to financial reports. Are there any comments on the financial reports? I will move to superintendent's report. Perfect. Thank you. Moving on to the treasurer's report. May I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report?
Motion.
Is there any discussion on the treasurer's report? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion to accept the bills for payment, which include the general fund, cafeteria fund, and the capital reserve fund?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Now, may I have a motion to approve the personnel items, including resignations, appointments, requests for child-rearing leaves, requests for extension of bereavement, change of status, and change of effective date with requirements accepted with regret?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. At this point of the meeting, we're going to move into a quick executive session to discuss a quick student issue, and we will be right back. May I have a motion to move into executive session? All right. May I have a motion to move back into regular session?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Before we move on to items for approval, I forgot to make a little announcement in the beginning of the meeting. I just want to remind the public who is watching on YouTube that at any point throughout the meeting, you can use the comment box to comment, raise a question, anything along those lines. You don't need to wait to the very end of the meeting. So I just wanted to make that short announcement. Now, may I have a motion for the approval of Christopher McFadden to work with Christopher Ross to complete a sports management internship with East Stroudsburg University for the 2020-2021 school year?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of school physicians and dentists for the 2020-2021 school year as per the attachment?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the contracts of affiliation as listed 1 through 4? These 1 through 4 contracts are with the Sunshine Station, CDD, Mountain View, and Green Trees ELC.
Motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Go ahead. Okay.
And just wanted to comment that there is no money. This is just for our career intentional education. They have to do foundations and things like that, but.
And I will too.
And all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the flexible instructional day plan to be considered the PDE for the 2020-2021 school year as per the attachment?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Could you explain what that is? Oh,
The flexible instructional days that was initially proposed last year, and it's so school districts, it was after the terrible storm we had 2 winters ago this spring. And a lot of schools couldn't come back because they were closed for such a lengthy period of time. So the governor and the legislature put out a proposal that schools were allowed to apply for flexible instructional days so that students could be taught at home for a maximum up to 5 days under this legislation. So last year we did not apply for days, and after the spring, we thought it might be suited to apply for the 5 days. A maximum of 5, it's just basically kids are taught at home. Teachers have to prepare lesson plans and send them home with the students to be taught on those days where plan has to be submitted, has to be approved by the board and submitted to CDC for approval. And again, it's only for a maximum of 5 days. And it's really for weather or emergencies. Really, it's not to do with the COVID issue. It's really just for a finite period.
and we were kind of waiting to see how it all played out last year when we didn't vote for it, correct?
Right, about, I think it was 100 out of the 500 districts applied for it, which is about 20%. And everybody else said, let's wait and see. And the districts that did apply all had one-to-one computer
Okay.
with their students. So it made it very easy to
Right.
assign them work because they all had a computer home with them at all times.
Okay.
And I think probably all 500 schools are applying now
Applying.
because who knows what twists and turns could happen this year.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on that topic? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of the bid for the purchase of a 2021 red light minibus, 18 passenger plus 1 wheelchair, less trade-in on a 2013 Chevy red light minibus, 18 passenger plus 1 wheelchair as per the attachment?
Motion.
You have a second? Good.
Second.
Yeah. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of a one-year extension to the trash removal recycling services bid with County Waste of PA from September 1st, 2020 to August 31st, 2021?
Motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval of board policies as listed 1 through 29? Many of these were just up for their 5-year review that we discussed last month.
Motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on any of those policies? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to readmit student 2019-2020 2000507 effective August 31st, 2020?
Motion.
Second.
And there's no discussion because that is a student issue. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to readmit student 2019-2020 1000831 effective August 31st, 2020?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the approval to readmit student 2019-2020 1001233 effective August 31st, 2020?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. And without further ado, we will move to Dr. Bell's presentation.
Thank you. Before I start, I just wanted to say a special thank you. Dr. Maria Farrell's here with us tonight, and she's wrapping up, is it August 7th? And Zoomed in with us tonight is Mr. Jim Mitchell, who finishes on August 14th. Maria, of course, is Director of Student Services, and Jim is Director of Secondary Ed. I know Jim's 28 years. Maria, is it 21 for you at BB? Yep. And so obviously, when you lose two veterans like that, it's a big loss. But secondly, they're both great people. So we're really going to miss them being part of this team on a professional and also on a personal level. So salute to Maria and to Jimmy out in the Zoom world. So we love you guys. Thank you for everything you've done.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much, John.
No more board meetings.
That's why she's wearing a mask.
Okay, before we start, this big binder here, this is everything you can think regarding reopening. Health and safety plans, reopening plans, PBE regs, Department of Health regs. This thing goes with me everywhere. I walked into the hospital yesterday for a meeting with Wayne Memorial, and they're like, "What is that?" I said, "You don't want to know, but it's everything that you can imagine." And before we start, I shared this with the board, but I wanted to read it for everyone's behalf. This came from Dr. Steve Yanni, Lieutenant of Dublin School District in suburban Philly. And he said, "I post this on Twitter, not seeking sympathy or empathy. It's just the reality we are facing. As our leaders plan for what school will look like in the near future, please be patient with them. If school starts normally, people will be angry. If school starts with restrictions, people will be angry. If we wear masks, people will be angry. If we don't wear masks, people will be angry. If student athletics are canceled, people will be angry. If student athletics are allowed to continue but without spectators, people will be angry. If we have a staggered start time, continue social distancing, or a combination of both, people will be angry. Our leaders are in a lose-lose situation. The choices they make over the next few weeks and months are in uncharted territory. They're doing the best they can with the information being provided to them. Pray for them, show them grace, be empathetic, and stay positive." Before I do the presentation, each one of you has a gray folder in front of you, and this is just for these are reference materials for you. The first thing in the gray folder is a copy of the PowerPoint for tonight, and it's slightly different from the one I shared earlier in the week. I made some minor revisions. The second document is just the listing of the 5 reopening options that we've considered up to this date. The next document is called an emergency instructional time template. And this is something brand new that came out yesterday. So once we make our final decisions about fall reopening, what some of the options might be, et cetera, we'll have to have you approve this at the August meeting. This is something brand new that they whipped up and gave to us this week. So this will be something, in addition to approving the health and safety plan that every district has to approve. In August, we'll ask you to approve the health and safety plan. Once the board approves it, it's filed with PDE, but the PDE does not evaluate it. They just keep it on file. They need a copy of all 500 plans, but they don't kick it back and say modify this or whatever. That rests at the local level. And then the emergency instructional time template, you'll approve this next month as well, but this one they will review. And if there's something they don't like, they'll kick it back. And then we would revise it at the next meeting.
The guidance on the health and safety plan from the state just came out today, correct? Okay.
Correct, yes. In the bottom of the 8th inning, they gave us the rules to the game. That's okay.
Right.
The rules were I think were pretty fair and pretty self-explanatory. And I think it's clear that they spoke to members in the education world in our field, because a lot of it seemed like it had definitely been hashed out.
Right. Good.
The next document is just a letter. There are only 6 counties in Pennsylvania that have full-fledged departments of health. That's it, 6. So Bucks County has kind of taken the lead. They have a large Department of Health, and they've taken the lead to try to provide guidance. For example, in Pennsylvania, in Pike County, we have a Department of Health nurse. And Tammy's a wonderful lady, and she's up to her eyeballs ever since this all started. But she wouldn't have the capacity to put something like this together because she doesn't have a time, to catch her breath. So Bucks County has been working as kind of the lead agency to prepare documents. So this first document is just a letter from the Bucks County Department of Health to all the 13 superintendents in Bucks County. That came out last month. And it was a very helpful document. It got shared all over the state because Bucks has the manpower to put these kinds of things together. And then later on, at the very end of the month, they came out with frequently asked questions. And it talks about, what you do with a confirmed positive case, what if there are symptoms, things of that nature. Talks about temperature readings, social distancing, mask, and all those things. So that's a good document. I think you'll enjoy reading those two. They're both pretty short, but they're very informative. And then the next 3 pages of paper is a very nice graphic. It's actually 2 pages, I guess, because it's copied 2-sided. But it's the green phase, yellow phase, and red phase from the Northampton area school district down by Bethlehem. And it's a very succinct. So I'm thinking once we finalize our plan, we'll put together something like this for our website, because it's much easier than a long narrative to just have a chart that explains, okay, these are the options in green, these are the options if we fall back to yellow, and these are, of course, there aren't too many options if you go to red. And then finally, the large document in the back of your folder, it's probably about 50 pages, 52. This is the draft health and safety plan that IU20 created. They have a great team down there. They've worked really hard on it. And they created this draft plan, and each district in IU20 is just going to tweak it to meet our needs. But it'll probably be 80 to 85% similar from district to district to district in IU20. And I actually shared this document with our neighbors in Wayne County from IU19, and they loved it. So now they're using it as a template too. So that way our neighbors to the south and the neighbors to the west, we're all operating off the same footprint and the same template to follow, which I think that consistency will be good for people in our region. So that's all. If you have reading desires or insomnia issues, there's plenty to read there for you. Okay, now we'll get to the presentation. All right, we'll go to the second slide, Dylan, please. Okay, so what's in this presentation for tonight? First of all, we'll do a brief review of what we did in the spring. I'll briefly mention what we're doing in terms of summer activities already. I'll review the results of the parent survey and the employee survey. I'll talk about 5 possible options for reopening in the fall. And then I'll update the community on health and safety information on what's been going on all summer, what we've been doing, so that they have a better picture of what school would look like in the fall, which will help families make their decision about what they want to do. Obviously, the priorities are pretty easy to come up. Every one of you could come up with these. We want to reopen school in a very safe manner. We need to implement more rigorous cleaning and safety standards, and the safety standards are voluminous. And then, of course, we wanted to provide families with options that would meet their needs. It's always better to give people options than this mandate, say, this is it, this is the only thing we have for you. It's always nice to have options for people to choose from because everybody's in a different situation. Everybody's family is dealing with different issues and have different concerns and different beliefs. So the more options we can give them, the better. Okay. Just from a timeline standpoint, and we'll revisit this again at the end of the presentation, we did the initial parent survey from July 1st through 12th. We also did an employee survey from July 6th through 15th. And then, of course, here we are tonight with the presentation. If we need to do any additional surveying of parents or teachers, next week would be the week we could do that so that we can get more information at our fingertips. And then we'll talk about when we could release a reopening plan. Obviously, with this new form for the emergency instructional plan that now you have to approve in August, we'll have to have some conversations tonight and maybe another opportunity between now and then, because you'll have to approve that brand new document on August 20th that we didn't know anything about. So we can talk later on about strategies and what we want to do going forward to flush out the different options for reopening. So that's a TBD right now. I thought it would be early August, but then we got hit with this new form from PDE, and that complicates our hoops to jump through. And then, of course, opening day is Monday, August 31st. We always open the Monday prior to Labor Day. And this year it's very late because Labor Day is late. Labor Day is on the 7th. So actually, we bought ourselves an extra week in a sense because Labor Day is so late without having to adjust our calendar whatsoever. Review of spring of 2020. The pros, we'll talk about the pros and the cons. The pros, the fact that we were able to build an online program in less than 2 weeks is still pretty incredible when you think about it. There were so many teachers and students and parents who worked really, really hard to make it work. And, I talked to so many parents who were absolutely exhausted by the end of the year because the younger your kid is, the more work it took on your part as a parent to really help. And we'll always be appreciative to parents for doing that. But we're going to try to make a pledge to never torture them like that again, because they had to work, I think, harder than the students. If their kids were little, it got harder and harder. It's one thing when your kid's a senior to tell them, go do your work. If they're a kindergartner, you can't do that. They'll be bouncing off the wall and not paying attention and stuff. So thank you to all the parents who bared with us as we patched something together to get through the end of the school year last spring. If there are cons to it, the one con would definitely be that there was a wide variation in delivery. If you had a secondary student, you would have 7 different classes, and you would see that there was a wide variation between what one teacher did and what another teacher did. And going forward with anything we do online, we're going to make that very systematic so there aren't wide variations. The second thing is we didn't have a learning management system, what's called an LMS, which is a system to tie everything together. Thankfully, Google Classroom is a free product that we were able to use, and Zoom we were able to tap into, but we didn't have a way to tie everything together. And I'll talk about the learning management system a little more in a minute. And the note is that online learning going forward will look very different than what it was in the spring. We will not be replicating what we did in the spring if we have to go forward. It'll be a more structured period by period type thing, live instruction, those kinds of things. Okay. Schoology, I always want to say Schoology like zoology, but it's Schoology. Schoology is a learning management system created by PowerSchool. And we've purchased Schoology to be our umbrella. It will encompass everything for PowerSchool attendance, everything for PowerSchool grades, any documents that the teachers have in Google Drive, Zoom conferences, and many of our textbook series will actually work well under the Schoology format. And this will make teachers' lives a lot better because everything will be able to be housed in one place. It'll be easy for them to store things for future reference. They can take things that they created this past spring and bring it in to Schoology so they don't have to recreate those things if we need to be online in any capacity in the spring. And so the teachers that I've spoken to, we're pretty happy to find out that we're going to have some umbrella software program that will hold everything instead of it being all over the place.
Will they still utilize Google Classroom, or Schoology takes the place of Google Classroom?
Schoology is like Google Classroom, but a lot more features of it. In fact, in the weekend review tomorrow, I'm going to send you a Venn diagram of what Google Classroom does, what Schoology does, and then what intersects. And
Okay.
it's a nice graphic, and I'll send that to you guys tomorrow.
Just, I can hear it now. I mean, parents just got used to, and the kids just got used to using Google Classroom. So now, if,
Yeah. So
obviously
and
it's a
this
last
will-
resort, but if
they-
we
and
move
they
to
admit
that,
Google Classroom is really a short-term thing. It's not for a long-term plan. Corey, what do you use at the college? Canvas? Yep. Mhm. Yeah. And that single sign-in for everything will be really nice. And just like when I teach at ESU, we use a thing called D2L, Desire to Learn, but it's the same idea. There's another one called Moodle. There's Blackboard. There's a few other ones, Sakai. There's a few other ones, but Schoology is one that seems to work really well in the K-12 setting with the products we already use that can fall under their umbrella. So just to review where we are with summer activities, if you're by here during the day, there's cars all over the place during the day and at night because we're back in action. June 22nd, that was a Monday, that started off-season workouts for our high school sports teams under the supervision of the coaches and doing social distancing and all those measures. We started with temperature checks on that day and everything. On Monday, July 6th, the Monday after 4th of July, we started our extended school year special education program. We opened up for youth sports camps, and we also opened up field usage for outside youth sports groups that need it. In fact, I saw girls softball right out front here when we were coming in. The Delaware Valley Youth Softball League was out there. So we have a lot of things going on. Secondary summer school is online because we had set that up well and back in the spring when we didn't know where we were going to be. And then, of course, we had canceled DV ACE for the spring. Here's just some pictures from our extended school year program. Kids in the pool, kids outside. You'll see this on the one on the left, that's a speech class where you see the teacher wearing the face shield. And then the next slide, it's around 20. Youth sports camp on the left, you'll see that's cheerleading. And on the right was field hockey camp. They were running the same time at the same camp. Some off-season team workouts on the left, that's boys soccer doing some stretching with their spacing. And then actually these four girls were all spaced out nicely. I took this picture. These were volleyball girls, actually. They're outside just knocking the ball around and doing their spacing. Okay. Here's more workouts. Here are girls soccer on the left and girls tennis on the right. So, but literally there's stuff going on every afternoon and every night, and the community continues to use the track to get their exercise. We never did close the track, and the community people have been very appreciative. They stop me all the time to thank me because so many places were closed, and the fact that they could come and exercise on the track and keep their distance from everybody else, a lot of people, particularly seniors, we're very appreciative that we kept that open. So, okay, let's move on to the parent survey results. We have approximately 4,400 is our projected enrollment for next year. And we had surveys filled out for 3,240 students. So that's a 74% response rate. So that's a pretty good response rate. Okay. The question at this time, my child will most likely attend traditional school, 85%, enroll in cyber school, 10%, participate in homeschooling, 3%, and other is 2%. Other might be an outside cyber school. It might be a private school, things of that nature. Now, I will tell you the attend traditional school, 85% is a very high number. And everybody I talked to is between 80 and 90, so we were right in the middle. I'm sure some people would change their vote if they had a chance because they may have voted before the mask issue. And the mask issue is a big concern for people. They're concerned about kids having to wear a mask all day long. And we'll talk a little later about ways that you can actually have mask breaks during the day to give kids a break as long as the numbers are small enough and they keep their social distancing. So maybe that number would be a little lower because of the mask requirement from the governor. Okay. The responses by school, the number of students by school, we had a really nice turnout when you figure DVES and Dingman's Primary and Dingman's Elementary have upper 400s in terms of number of kids in the school. And Chahol is right around 400. DVMS has about 500 kids in the building. Dingman's Middle School has about 550, and the high school is around 1,500. And the cyber's around 85 at the end of the year last year. So we got pretty good participation from all the buildings. There's, way more than half of every building, way more than half of their students were represented by the survey. The question when we ask people about their hope, it is my hope that school opens. 64% said traditionally with in-person instruction. 21% said with a hybrid option of in-person and at home. 3% said, I don't have a preference because my child will enroll in cyber or is already enrolled in cyber. And 13% said they wish it doesn't open and that we go 100% online with DV teachers. So it's interesting when you break it apart a little more, you see a little more differentiation when you start giving them more options. Okay. We're dead. The question we asked next was, will your child buy school lunch? Because we were just curious. We wanted to get a pulse on what people are thinking. And 51% said, yes, their kids might buy lunch. 49% said no, which is a little interesting because our normal participation rate is only 47% of our students. So the parents actually were a little higher than what the kids normally do. That's right. That's right. Yeah, go buy lunch. Go buy. Okay. The next question is we wanted to get a pulse on school transportation to see if there were going to be any potential changes there. So we asked them in the past, have you used school transportation? And one choice was usually or on most days, and that was 78%. 11% said they use transportation sometimes, and another 11% said they never use it. On the next slide, we asked them, what about using school transportation in the future? And it drops from 78% to 71%. 28% said they'll arrange private transportation. That could be dropping them off, having family friends take them, older kids driving, things of that nature. And then 1%, we snuck out 1% for the kids in Matamoros who can walk or ride their bikes to school. But the big thing to know for us to know is that typical everyday usage of buses would drop from about 8%. So that's good to know. And then this question, some other district had asked this question, so I asked it as well. The law says if you provide transportation, you must provide transportation for all kids, but the law also says you do not have to provide transportation. So it can be all or none. So we asked the question just curiously, if transportation was not available, I could get my child to school. 2/3 said they could, 1/3 said they could not. So it was just an interesting, just to take the pulse of people and their abilities to get kids here, okay? Then we wanted to ask them about technological needs, obviously, because if you're gonna do remote learning or online learning, we asked them, my child has a computer for instruction. 72% said they did, and 28% said no, they would need to borrow a Chromebook. And just to note, that means 903 kids, when you take 28% of those surveyed, that means 903 no votes, meaning they would need Chromebooks. We do anticipate a much higher number than that for two reasons. Number one, if this year we're going to do live instruction, we will need every kid to have a device. We can't have kids share because they're both going to have to Zoom into classes at the same time. And then secondly, we only polled 75% of our people. So the 25 who did not do an online survey are probably more likely to need a device because they didn't even do the online survey. So I think last time we did, I think we distributed over 1,300 Chromebooks. But with the CARES money from the federal government, we're in great shape. We're almost at 1-to-1. So that we're almost at 4,400. So we are fine. We can give every kid a device to use if we're going to do any kind of online learning. So that puts us in a really great place compared to where we were last year. Regarding technology, again, 99% of those who surveyed said they have internet at home. We don't know if the people who didn't do the survey have internet at home or not. That's the part we don't know. But of the 75% of our students that were polled, 99% had it. 80% had Blue Ridge Penn Teledata. 15% had Optimum, which is available in the Matamoros, Westfall area. And then the other 5% were different things, such as Verizon, DSL, and things, choices like that. We asked if they had cell phones, and 60% use Verizon. I think everybody said they had a cell phone. 60% Verizon, 16% of the people use AT&T, 10% use Sprint, T-Mobile, and then there's 14% of other assorted ones. Some of the lesser ones, I forget some of the names of them. Consumer Cellular is one. And I forget some of the other ones, but they were all like 2%, 1%, stuff like that.
And I believe there's probably a Schoology app too for mobile devices as well. You know,
Yeah.
it's not ideal. It's
Yeah.
not ideal, but you know.
Right. So if they didn't have a device, but they had a phone,
right,
it'd be a
the worst
backup
case
plan.
scenario,
Right.
Absolutely.
And then we asked, other schools did this. We didn't do this in the spring, but some schools did, where they provide the Wi-Fi password so people could come to the school parking lots and upload and download material, schoolwork. So if they didn't have internet at home, they could come to the school campus, log in right from their car in the parking lot, and then they could upload anything, download anything. And we asked them if if they would use that. Only 35% said yes, and 65% said no. So we might have to dig a little deeper to see if that's worth the effort or not. But it's good to know that, you know, there's more than a third that would take advantage of it, and we could probably have Dylan fix that, make that work for us. You know, when he gets done tonight, he can start working on it.
I think if 99% of them have internet at home, I think that's probably why many of them. I'm not sure that they would need to come to the parking lot,
Right.
but the 25% that didn't respond, they may need
They
it.
may benefit from
Yeah.
it, sure. Yeah, their survey might be 100%. Yes, I would do it. You know, if we did a paper and pencil survey.
Or they're just going to drop their kids off in the parking lot to do all of their schoolwork using our
I'll be
Wi-Fi.
back. I'm going
That-
shopping at Walmart. You sit
They
on the.
can socially distance between the parking spots.
We have all these picnic tables out front. They could sit out front. My mom goes shopping. So, yeah.
Yeah, but with 35%, you know, it's probably something to even look at for a few dedicated parking lots.
Yeah.
You know, if you just pick one or two.
Yeah, but we did. We said we
Oh,
could do
perfect.
high school. We could do one of the buildings at Dingman's, and then perhaps Shahola, and just have 3 parking lots at the 3 different attendance areas. And it might be a nice service for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
With not too much effort on our
Absolutely.
part. So. We also wanted to poll them about their co-curricular participation. In the past, the parents that did the survey told us that 68% of the kids surveyed participated in the past. And we wanted to see if that would drop, if there were any concerns. And it actually was the other way around. Parents actually said 79% hope that their kids will participate in the future. So that's a positive sign.
Get them out of the house.
Now moving from the parent survey over to the employee survey. We have 660 employees, 527 responded to the survey, which is about approximately 80%. Of those 527 that responded, 53% were teachers and 47% were staff. And then just from the poll, again, teachers were 53%, and that also includes counselors and psychologists, stuff like that. Everyone who's in the teachers union, I labeled as teachers for the simplicity here. So 53% of the survey was teachers, 18% were instructional assistants, 7% were secretaries, 4% of the staff were from facilities, 3% were from transportation, and then all the other groups, cafeteria administrators, police officers, et cetera, they all had less than 3% representation. So it's heavily weighted towards the teachers compared to our other job groups.
John, of the 660 employees, what percentage of that is teachers?
370 of the 660.
Okay,
So about 370 instructional, 290 support staff.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Employee participation by school. Obviously, the high school is 3 times bigger than any other building. So the fact that they had 3 times more people answer makes sense. But you'll see the participation is pretty good. You know, participation is anywhere from 57 to 70 for all the other buildings that are around 400 or 500 kids. And then the high school, of course. So the employee participation. So this survey will be heavy on teachers and heavy on high school based on the participation rates. Okay. For the staff, the reopening preference, reopening in a traditional way where all students come to school every day. Of course, these are all assuming that we follow CDC guidelines, social distancing and mask and those things. But traditional said 53%. Another 11% opted for the hybrid as their first choice, where some students are in class while the rest are live on Zoom. So that gets you up to 64. And then another 24% said they'd prefer alternating days, where 50% of the kids are in school and 50% are working independently at home. And then finally, just 13% said that we would do complete remote learning, where all students learn via Zoom lessons from home. Okay. We also asked the staff about medical conditions. Obviously, this is private stuff, and this is between them and Dr. Schaefer, who's our HR, oversees everything with HR. I don't even know who these people are that answered accordingly, because we want to respect their HIPAA privacy rights. But we gave them a list of the medical conditions that are related with COVID, and 30% said they had one or more of the underlying conditions that are listed. And then it jumps to 41% when you include all family members inside their household would have one or more of those conditions, which obviously would be a concern. There's no doubt about it. When we asked, real quick, that we asked about one last question about with these conditions for you or your family members, would they prevent you from returning to work in August? 8% of the people surveyed said that it may prevent them from returning to work. The raw number of the survey is 44. If you factored in the other 25% of the people who didn't finish, or the other 20% who didn't finish the survey, and then there may have been people who might have been afraid or hesitant to put it on a survey, but they might communicate it person to person to Peg. So the number would probably, I think, be well into the 50s. And we'll work with each one of them, those people, to find out what their issues are. Once they understand our health and safety initiatives that we have in place, the number might even go down once they realize what we're doing. You know, right now there's the fear of the unknown, and that really scares people. So the more knowledge we can share with them tonight, the better, to make people hopefully feel better. So. No, this was actually after. This one was a little later. I think it didn't start till July 6th, which I think was the same day as the mask ordeal, or ordinance, sorry. I'm not sure. I know when we've met with the association leadership, they've been very adamant about masks even before it was mandated by the governor. They were like, everybody should be wearing masks. We need to be extra cautious. So I know the leadership has that, but I don't know about each individual person, because they're all off on summer vacation, and I'm not sure how tuned in everybody is, to be honest.
That'll do. Once the health and safety at their college, we were at 12% initially, and once health and safety came out last week, we dropped it. It was cut in half, actually.
Okay, that's good to know.
Hopefully,
yeah, that's good to know.
Some proportion.
Good. Okay, we wanted to ask staff about their technology needs if they had to work remotely. So 79% of our employees that completed the survey said their job does require them to use technology. And 79% of those people said that they have technology at home to do their job from home if they had to. 6% said they don't. The other 15% are in jobs that don't require tech, so it wasn't applicable. So, the question also was, are you comfortable wearing, and would you be requesting PPE? And 79% said yes to masks. Dropped down to 57% for shields, and then 40% for gloves. We've been buying supplies all summer long, and we still continue to buy, and we're also making shields with our 3D printers. So we continue to try to stockpile as much of this stuff as possible, because we don't know how long we might need to use it. So we need to get our hands on as much as possible. Okay. We asked, would you be able to routinely clean your work area to keep it clean, like the high touch areas? And 93% said yes, and 7% said no. And which is interesting, because that 7% is right next door to 8% with the people who are most concerned. So they may be the ones that are hesitant about cleaning anything and touching anything, so that number really jives with the 8% concerned employees. Okay, this is the part we've all been waiting for. And God knows how many twists and turns we'll go through between Washington and Harrisburg between now and August 31st. But the 5 options, as we've studied them and put them out here for your review, obviously number 1 is all students attend in person daily. That's what we call the old normal. And we don't know when that will happen again. But that's one, of course, that's one of the options. All the way down at number 5 is the polar opposite. That's where no kids come to school and all the kids learn online. They'd have a full day, they'd attend a full day of classes via Zoom from home. And then options 2, 3, and 4 are hybrid options. Option 2 would allow families to choose whether they want to send kids in for in-person instruction or whether they would rather have their kids stay home and Zoom into the classroom on a daily basis. So the way that would work is if I'm teaching algebra, I'd be at the front of the room up by my smartboard. There may be 15 kids in the room, and there may be another 10 kids at home watching on Zoom. And the Chromebook will be seated or situated, picture like if there's 5 rows across, it might be in row 3, the first desk, facing the smartboard. So none of the kids are on the screen, just the teacher and the smartboard are on the screen. But the kids at home are getting the same live instruction from that algebra teacher that the kids in the room are, and they'll have the ability to ask questions and things like that. So that's option number 2. One of the things that we've talked about, and we still have to work on procedures for each one of the options, whatever we're going to offer, we're going to do procedures, but we've talked about if we're counting on them to be a daily Zoom kid, we're going to need some kind of notification before they come back to become an in-person kid because of transportation and other
Okay.
things. But conversely, if there's an in-person student and say they need to be sent home to be quarantined for 14 days, we can automatically put them in the Zoom because it doesn't have other ramifications. It's much easier to have someone go home than it is to have someone come in and be ready for them, because the teacher might make 15 paper copies for tomorrow's class, and then all of a sudden there's 20 kids in the room tomorrow. Where'd you 5 come from? So they need to have some kind of advance notice.
So you are not required a seat on the bus for the students that are at home?
We are required to roster a seat for every single kid. But if we tell the driver, okay, Johnny's not coming to school, we won't plan on stopping at his driveway. And then we don't want to surprise the bus driver where all of a sudden Johnny's at the mailbox. We want to be able to tell the driver in advance, hey, Johnny's coming back Monday morning. So make sure you don't go by his driveway, that kind of thing. That's all. But yeah, we still have to fully roster every single kid. Option 3 is an alternating day schedule where we could have kids attend in person or via Zoom on alternating days. So now that would reduce the class size even more. So for example, if you had 50% of the kids coming in and then the other 50% would be home Zooming in. In option 2, we're not saying 50%. The kids that want to come will come. The kids who don't want to come or their parents don't want them to come won't. That might be 75-25, 70-30, who knows. Under option 3, we would split the alphabet and say, today we are teaching A through L. A through L last names can either be in person or Zoom, but M through Z are not. Or you could do let me explain it another way. I'm sorry, let me back up on that one. A through L would be the only ones allowed to come today. No, I'm saying that wrong again. I'm very sorry. I'm getting 4 and 3 mixed up. Alternating days, the way it would work is you only do live instruction every other day. Whether you're in person or Zoom, you're only getting half the level of instruction. Now, if you go to let's compare it to number 4, and hopefully I can make it clearer. In number 4, you would be in person. There's no Zoom in number 4. This is a non-Zoom option. You would be in person or you'd be working independently at home. In number 3, you have the in-person or the Zoom options, but in 4, there is no Zoom option. It's just, and because not all schools have the technology to pull this off, and we think we do. We still have some little work to do with some of the details and things of that nature. And what do we do for a child who can't log in synchronously or live, and how do we help those kids? You know, and so we got to work on that. But again, so 3, you have a choice between in-person or Zoom with alternating. In 4, there's no Zoom component. You're just working independently. And then 5 is total Zoom. That's if we go like back to red, if things are bad and the governor says you're closed physically, everything has to be done remotely online. So. No. Yeah, it was going to be for the public to hear people in the back, but they're not on because there's no public in the room.
Josh just wants to use the microphone.
I should have just told him yes.
So, Dr. Val, for oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. So this is my question on this. Rosemary, can you hear me all the way down there? Okay, so that's how I'll talk. I don't need a microphone.
Turn your volume up or listen to your earphone. You'll hear
I'll
it.
probably be blasting everybody out that's watching up the mountain and side street. There's a whole group gathered, so hello to you all. Listen, if a child goes into the class and sits there and says, I'm going to go to school every day under option 2, if it was my children, I would like for them to at least spend a few days at home learning the Zoom in case we get shut down, so that they have a little experience, so that in case we get shut down, they're not thrown into Zoom, you know, a format that they're not kind of used to. I think ideally it would be good for the kids to go to school if it's feasible with their parents, or they can pick a day where they could just sit home that day and learn the Zoom part of it in case we get shut down. Would that make any sense?
There's a variety. You could do that. We could actually practice it where we could say on such and such day at 4 o'clock, you know, a teacher who's willing to do it. We'll say at 4 o'clock, we're all going to meet at 4 o'clock on Zoom, you know, just to try it, to make sure it works. Or we could even do it from the classroom where we could get Chromebooks out and teach kids how to log on. Most kids know already because most kids had to do it in the spring. But not everybody Zoom, so not everybody's aware of how
Not
to
the kindergartners,
What's that?
and not the kindergartners that are just coming
Yeah,
into
that's true.
school.
They're gonna
Yeah, we
be-
got all.
Parents will too.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not so much worried about the middle school and the high school, or even the later elementary, but the earlier children, you know. And I never even thought about that. So Jessica, that's good about the new kindergartners coming in, because certainly this is all new to them.
And it's also very likely, Jack, that open house will probably be via Zoom. It's unlikely that we're going to be at a state or in a condition that where we're going to be allowed to have all those parents come into that room. And you know what the halls are like on open house night. So the first time for those young parents of young kids, they're going to learn how to Zoom on open house night. So they may want to practice before then, because literally they'll go, if they have multiple kids. Remember in elementary school, you go to one teacher for 15 minutes, then you go to another. And if you have 3 kids in the building, you go to the third time slot. And the secondary level, we go from period 1 through period 7. It's most likely we're going to have to do that with parents for open house, because in early September, I don't think we're going to be ready to have large crowds of people. You know, right now we're bound at 250. If 2 people came for every high school kid, that would be 3,000 parents here. Not that all families send 2, but conceivably you could have 3,000 people here, which would be really bad.
Well, I'm just writing questions I got down here all over the place, and I have tons of questions, but I don't know when to ask them with this format. We keep talking about the cost of this and the mask, like Schoology. What did that cost us? Where'd that money come from? Masks, cleaning. We're going to have to do all of this stuff. What I would ideally like to see is we keep a record of every penny we spend. Because if there's going to be government money to come, we may need to prove that. And if there's not money to come, I'd like to send the governor a bill for all of this at the end of it. And of course, he's going to reject that bill. But I'd like to go to the public and say, I sent the guy a bill and he sent it back to me, unpaid. Because
I haven't talked about the cost of each option yet, because we didn't get to those slides. But Bill can tell you about the tracking.
I just think we need to track every last penny of this, and there's nobody better than yourself, Bill. So, I just don't want to fail to say that.
We are, and there's multiple funding options, or I should say streams. I mean, it's not guaranteed. For example, from our expenses that we incurred in the spring to date, just yesterday and today, we're finished up on sending it to FEMA. We're hoping that they will cover that, and even some of the overtime. No guarantee though. They could say, oh, no, you had an option under, some other program. So you're just gonna hit them all, but we're tracking them all. We've identified the grants that we approved last month in the budget, some of that for expenditures. But depending on how and what we open up, obviously, then it's gonna be a moving target. I mean, we had for technology, of course, we had textbooks and the supplies for PPE and other things to help in the situation. But we're tracking it, we're gonna do the best, and then the other thing is there's talking about a fifth funding source from the federal government that might have the school districts identified. The key is what is gonna be allowed.
Right, the $450 billion that they talked about today. The reason John, the reason that I say about this, and I'm so serious about it, is I'm just up in Maine and I'm talking to educators, and I'm talking to this one woman who she's a teacher in one school district, and she was Zooming. I posted it on Facebook. A lot of people say she was posted out of her barn reading her children Charlotte's Web, creating a thing, and I thought that was really cool. And her district is using, I don't know what all these teachers were talking about. They were talking about seesaws. I thought they meant the seesaw, in the schoolyard. And I said, aren't those things illegal, the insurance companies? And they said, no, there's this program that we got, and it really helped us. It worked with Google Classroom, and it really helped us reach the early educators, because they were all like the younger kids. And then the other teachers were saying, oh, we wanted to get that. We had the free version, and it was like horrible, but our district couldn't afford that. And the state's not sending us any money and everything. And I hear our state here all the time say, we'll give guidance and support. And I say, well, if the support isn't in the form of cash money, that's not really support. So I want to track every last penny that this costs us, that we have to spend to do this. And I think it'd be beneficial because we may need that accurate record at the end. So I appreciate, Bill, you doing that.
John, if I could ask a question or two. I think one of these options, I think there are a couple of goals here. One is I know there are parents who are concerned for a variety of reasons about sending their children to school at all. So I think an option that allows students, those particular students, to Zoom on a daily basis, I think is attractive. That might reduce the number of students in a classroom. So my first question is, what is the ideal number of students per classroom do you think that we need in order to adequately social distance? If we have a class of 25, what do we get it down to space people apart?
And it varies building to building, and it varies inside buildings as well. I had a conversation with Dr. Blom today about the high school. The older part of the high school here, which we call down the ramp to the RPod, those rooms are octagons because they're all pods, and those rooms are strangely configured. Whereas the rooms over in the 910 side of the high school are big rooms. Most of those are 900 square feet. They're 30 by 30 rooms. They're big rooms. And so on that side, you can get some of the places you can get 23 or 24 kids and still have 6-foot social distancing, believe it or not, between kids. There are other rooms where we are in where it was 18, where in order everybody to have social distancing between. So the size of the room varies. DVES, the rooms, the building's new, and the primary school, which is relatively new, have real big rooms. Shahola has a bunch of big rooms, and then some other odd shaped ones. Dingman's Elementary has the smallest rooms because it's the oldest of the elementary schools. So the number to keep kids socially distanced is lower in some of those, and it varies room to room there because they have some odd shapes because that building had multiple additions to it and not all the additions were the same size classroom. So we've gone through and actually mapped out what the maximum number of kids can fit in this room before we exceed the social distancing numbers. And then therefore, of course, you can't, if we exceed those social distancing, like for example, excuse me, if we can't have everybody be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 feet, because there's a lot of variation between 3 feet, 6 feet. But if we can't do something like 6 feet, then there wouldn't be an opportunity for kids to take their mask off when all those kids are in the room. If you have distancing where you have a room that can hold 23 with social distancing and there's 16 in it, that's actually an opportunity for kids. If they're seated at their desk, they actually could have a mask break and take their mask off. But if they're going to get up to go to the pencil sharpener or anything, they got to put their mask back on. If they're going getting ready to go to the hallway when the bell rings, they got to get their mask back on. So in those situations where it's less than the max number, they can actually get a little bit of a reprieve from the mask. If it's if it's beyond that number, then they're going to keep the mask on in that class.
Good.
So it'll vary class to class based on class size and the enrollment, the physical shape, the physical size of the room, and then the enrollment numbers in the class.
And those enrollment numbers and the physical size of the room is clearly the impetus for options 3 and 4, where it anticipates the idea of splitting.
Right.
That's so we reduce the number of students in
Right.
a classroom. I would ask if, say, we were to utilize option 3, where students A through L attend on Monday and M through Z on Tuesday, and so forth, and they rotate, would we still be able to incorporate an option number 2? So that if you had 25 students in a class and 5 said, we're not comfortable sending our kids at all, now we're down to 20, and you split that on, could we still use option 2 if we were to use option 3 or 4?
Yes, option 3 is like a little bit of, it's a little bit of 4 and a little bit of 2. It's almost like a hybrid of those two hybrids. Because where 2 is, we don't have a cap. We would think that between the in-person and Zoom, it will flush out to be 100% aren't going to come, and we're not going to have 100% of people opt to go Zoom either. It's going to be some combination. In 3 and 4, now you're controlling the maximum number of kids because either A, we've got too many kids coming, or B, something's happened and we've moved backwards. Say we've moved from the green phase back to yellow and the governor's clamping down on us. In option 3, I did a poor job explaining that earlier, but the way that would work is, theoretically, if the kids are divided into A and B, there's 50% in the A group and 50% in the B group. In option 3, that 50% would be split again, 25 in person, 25 on Zoom, while the other 50% is home doing independent work. Instead of 50-50 now, because something has transpired and we need less kids in the room, now it's 25 in the room, 25 Zoom, 50 independent. And then they flip on alternating days. Speaking of alternating days, we didn't talk about that yet, but a lot of districts, instead of doing an A-B schedule, they're doing A-A-B-B, so that you have the same kids in the room for 2 days in a row. Then you do your deep cleaning, disinfecting before the next batch comes in. If you did A, B, then you have to go top to bottom, everything, because you got a whole new group of kids coming tomorrow. Another structure that some people are doing is they're doing A on Monday, Tuesday, B on Thursday, Friday, and they have something else going on Wednesday. Sometimes they're Zooming to everybody. They're all doing a variety of things. Some have Wednesday as an independent day. I'm not sure I'm sold on giving up Wednesday, to be honest with you. But other districts are doing that, where you're either going to be a Monday, Tuesday kid or a Thursday, Friday, and you're probably going to get Zoom from your teacher on Wednesday. So.
That's so amazing too, because the new research is more airborne, than surfaces. So they're giving up that, Wednesday to deep clean, when not theoretically, everything's proven that the surfaces aren't as,
Right.
conductive as the airborne.
Right. Yeah, we've really come a long way. Remember, everybody was wiping down groceries and everything, and now we've come so far away from the surface because it's really very unlikely to contract it from surfaces. It really is person to person.
So I'm not hearing that down here at all, what was just said. Does that mean that we don't have to deep clean on Wednesdays now?
We have multiple versions of how often we're going to deep clean based on what version of reopening we have. So it'll
Okay.
vary. I mean, for example, if we just did 2 days of A and then 2 days of B, then we'll pay overtime so that after the second day of A, we're going to deep clean all night. So we're ready for the Bs to show up the next day.
And what
Yeah.
happens in theory number one when everyone's here daily?
When everyone's here daily, if everyone's here daily, we're probably going to be in a whole different place with the virus. But we have the capability. It will take overtime, but we have enough of the fogger backpack sprayer things now that if we need to, we can disinfect the entire school, even this building. We can disinfect the entire school overnight. It will mean lots of overtime, but it's physically possible. But the night crew will have to work extra hours. You know, they won't work 3 to 11. It'll be probably 3 to 1 or 3 to 2. In the
And how much of the day crew can we put on the night crew?
How much can day crew what?
How much of the day crew can we put on the night crew?
Oh, they can also make overtime at that time as well so that they don't have to stay later. Yeah, the daytime guys could stay longer, get overtime, and then that helps them. That puts more hands on deck to do your daily cleaning and your disinfecting deep cleaning.
Yeah, it's not what I really mean. I mean, instead of working the daytime, work the nighttime so it's spotless in the daytime and keep a skeleton crew on daytime.
Well, we actually are trying to figure out how we can have more help during the day too, Jack, because they want us, they're recommending that we're cleaning during the day of all the high touch areas, believe it or not. You know, even though touching isn't as prevalent or as serious as we once thought, we were trying to work at options. And I know we're getting into the weeds, but we're actually looking to see if we could do a swing shift with somebody and take one of the 3 to 11 people and have them come in 11 to 7 so that we could do more cleaning at lunchtime, hit all the doorknobs, things of that nature with extra help. The other thing we're going to have is lunches. We're getting ahead of ourselves in the slide a little bit.
Before we move ahead to all of that,
Yeah.
can we just stick to the options?
Yep.
Because I do have a question about
Yeah.
option 3 before we move on and I forget what I want to ask. To me, option 3 really offers a lot of flexibility. One of my questions is related to parents' work schedules. I'm seeing a number of parents working part-time. You know, there are going to be parents who want their children to come back full-time, and we need to be ready. If we have 80% coming back, we need to be ready for 80%. If we have 50%, we'll be ready for that. But my question is for those parents who work part-time, the alternating days, is that something you can work out for them? If they're willing to say, I'll stay home for 2 days and work with my children at home, but I need to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or I need to work Tuesday, Thursday. Is that something that under option 3, we're able to work out with them? I realize it's technical, but it could help you have fewer students on that day. But you may have other days where it's going to increase that average number.
And I'm not sure the first thing we have to do is we have to pick from this menu of what we're going to do because we can't do all these, they contradict each other. So we have to narrow our options down. And then once we do that, then we can deal with those individual student cases to figure out how we can help those families that are transition. I have slides for each one of these options that will provide more details on each one of these options. So maybe we should go through the next couple slides.
Before we get ahead of ourselves. And one of my other questions that listening to everybody, one of the recommendations is we keep the students in their classrooms. Are we considering that under these options? Will that come up in the slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that'll
right.
pop up.
Okay.
I'll show you when it gets there
So,
too.
There's so many possibilities for what could happen in the fall or over the winter with the virus might stay flat, it might increase, we don't know. And that's one of the hard things about this, is just dealing with a level of uncertainty that none of us have been accustomed to for years.
Right.
What is the flexibility between these different options? If we're in green and we start the year number 1, all students attend in person daily, but we go into yellow in November, is it we pick an option and then if we go into red, go down to number 5 and everybody's online? Or do you think there's any flexibility with 2, 3, and 4 as something we might have to do as the circumstances change throughout the year?
I would say where we're at right now, option 1 is not going to cut it for a good chunk of our families. I think option 2 is the better way to go, because the families that want to send their kids can, and the families that don't want to send them don't. So it's always awesome when you can give families choices as opposed to mandating things. The idea of us not in being a number 1, where all students attend in person daily, I think that may not be until there's a vaccine or
I think
some
that
other
pushes.
significant breakthrough. Because there are a lot of families who they're just frightened with the idea of having to send their kids back.
I think that.
Can I just go back to what Pam was saying? Is there, you somebody else talking?
I was.
Go ahead, you first.
I think that by only allowing kids to attend in person or nothing, I think that it forces a lot of people to go to cyber, which obviously, and while that's certainly another viable choice for families, obviously it may not be the best as far as our budget goes. But I did have one more question, John. So as far as classroom size, if we've mapped out the maximum amount of students that we can have in each classroom, and I know that in the secondary level, this is obviously a little bit more difficult, but are we considering, I know right now, and I know that it's wonderful having, all of the kindergarten classes together and all of the 4th grade classes together and so forth. But if when we're mapping out who's coming back and who's not, as far as option number 2, will you say, okay, well, this 3rd grade class is only going to have 18 students, so this teacher is moving their classroom to over here because that's how many. Do you know what I mean? Whereas this grade, more kids are coming back, so we need to utilize these classrooms for those grades.
We are looking at some teachers moving on the elementary level, changing rooms to bigger size rooms.
Right. Okay. Especially as far as grades, and we know that there's bigger grade. Do you know what I mean?
And the 2 grades of particular, of all the elementary grades, sorry, I don't mean to, I'll talk up. Of all the elementary grades right now, the ones that if just about everybody comes to school, the 2 places where we're high in terms of social distancing is 5th grade at Shahola and 3rd grade at Dingman's Elementary. They're larger class sizes than any of the other grades. All the other grades in all the other elementary schools, we're in good shape. Whoever wants to come, we can handle them. In 5th grade at Shahola, if everybody comes, we're going to have to get creative. And if everybody shows up every day at 3rd grade in Dingman's, we're going to have to get creative, moving rooms around, things of that nature.
Would you use a gymnasium and initially do?
Well, fortunately, we have every one of the elementaries has extra rooms because we've lost so much enrollment over the years. So we can get creative with the use of reading teachers, with IAs.
Okay.
We can do some different things. We can do some pullouts and things of that nature. So that would be if every single kid, if no one chose Zoom, if everybody chose to come, we'd have to have a backup plan. And so we're working on those. How do we utilize those extra spaces? And then also, should we move this teacher from this room to a room that we know is considerably larger? And we'll do a swap, because this class is only running 21 this year, and this one's running 26 and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Think about teaching like a lecture style college class here. You could pull off this thing with
Sure.
two sections at
Yep.
one time.
Yep.
So cafeterias, gyms. We're using outside tents at the college.
Yep.
Like all these different things. Flexibility is the name of the game now.
Cafeteria is going to be our biggest challenge. Cafeteria will be our biggest challenge because in order to space those, in order to space the kids properly, we're going to be using hallways. We're going to be using gyms. We're going to be using other places to put tables and chairs so that we can space them out enough, because they're too cramped in a traditional lunchroom. We run 6 lunches at the high school with 250 kids in each one, almost.
So they won't eat in their classroom?
Well, the problem with eating in the classroom is that when the kids eat, that's when the teachers have their duty-free 30-minute lunch. So then you'd have to scramble to find other people to supervise their class because they have to have their lunch as well at the same time. So you can't just say Mrs. Jones is going to eat with her class. That's a violation of the contract.
But is it easier perhaps to find, if that's possible, staff to go into that classroom while the teacher's having lunch rather than scatter people about?
Well, it depends how much staff, it really is a logistical, how much staff do you have? Because now one person is watching 20 kids in a room, as opposed to if we have more tables, say at Shahola, right outside the cafeteria in that hallway leading towards the special ed class, there's a big area there. You could put multiple tables that one person could watch. So they could watch a lot more than 20
Just
kids.
another area to clean,
And that's the thing.
passing each
You're
other.
going to have more cleaning because we're going to have more tables because you're going to have less kids per table. So let's go through these.
Can we just, while we're still on this slide, and what Pam was talking about with the alternating days,
Let me cover the slides and then ask questions, because
Yep.
I have a slide for each option, and then
Hey.
that solves some of the problems, and then.
John, we're talking about logistics here, and Rosemary's sitting 45 feet away from me, and I'm screaming, and my wife is texting me saying to me, "You sound mad." I'm having trouble hearing half the people here, so if you don't mind, the alternating days, as Pam mentioned, the people that I know that work part-time have also, a lot of them contacted me. And the problem that they have with that is that their schedules, part-time workers, oftentimes they don't find out their schedule till that week, and their time is alternating as well. So that's another consideration. I just didn't want to get that lost. Thank you.
I love the idea, parents having the option, but some parents won't be able to have this option.
Exactly.
If they have to work, they can't be at home helping their child if they don't have the flexibility.
Okay, let me show you that I have 8 slides. I have more slides, but there's 8 more that are all tied.
It's just a poor setup.
And then you can ask me all the questions you want about the 5 options, but some of them will answer themselves. Just some special program notes. Every district that I've talked to, they are running their self-contained special ed classrooms 5 days a week, because the continuity is important. The instruction for the kids is so important. It's so beneficial for them. And because those classes already have small numbers, that we don't have spacing issues for them with we don't have any social distancing spacing issues for those kids. Secondly, all the places I've spoken to are operating their CTE career tech programs 5 days a week, because again, that's another thing that's really hard to replicate, changing a tire on Zoom. You know, you can watch the YouTube video on how to change a tire, but you can't really do it. Their classrooms are not huge, but we can teach them in their lab spaces if we have to. For example, we have 8 bays in the auto. We could take one of those bays and spread the desk out there so that they wouldn't be as crowded as in the classroom. You know, same thing in the culinary. Instead of being in the classroom, we could run class in the dining room. You know, those kinds of things. So that would accommodate the career tech. Also, when I've pretty much every school I've spoken to, they are not doing alternating days for elementary kids because of fear of it being a childcare nightmare for the parents. Then there are other reasons too. The younger they are, the less likely they are to get it. The younger they are, the smaller they are, the more space they have in a room. A room that's 30 by 30 with seniors in it is a lot different than a room that's 30 by 30 with kindergartners in it, in terms of the space that they occupy. So that's what my research has shown after talking to all kinds of people around the state. This is normally what they're doing with self-contained CTE and elementary. Okay, the next slide. I just wanted to make you aware of additional costs per student, because there obviously are cost ramifications with everything. If a child were to leave our program, whether that's live instruction, in-person instruction, or Zooming in, there's no cost for that, obviously, beyond the normal cost. But if a kid were to choose to go to DV Cyber, if they were to go to DV Cyber, and it should say college prep track or the workforce track, it's an extra $4,622 per kid. If they go to an outside cyber program in their regular ed, it will cost the taxpayers an extra $13,930. If they go to an outside cyber in their special education, it'll cost $27,260. So if 100 extra students went to DV Cyber, that would have an extra unbudgeted cost of $462,000. If 100 extra students went to an outside cyber, that would cost us somewhere between 1.4 million and 2.7 million in additional costs.
Yes, so the 100 students on DV Cyber would be 1 mil.
Yeah,
Tax increase.
you're right. 1 mil tax increase, right? This is for the year.
And we're at 10% of
Was it 8, I think? I forget.
I thought I saw 10.
Yeah, I forgot. It's in one of the earlier slides. Okay, Dylan, you can go to the next slide. So again, this is more details about option 1. Option 1 is what we would call to return to normal. And obviously the best form of teaching is a teacher in a classroom, but we can't always have that under these conditions. But in this scenario, this is where everybody goes back. What is the con to it? The con to it is that you'd have a large number of students in school at once, because theoretically you'd have almost 100% of your students. And then the cost related to it would be unbudgeted expenses for people who say, listen, if my only option is coming back, I'm not coming back. I'm going to cyber. So you would have cyber costs, like I just did in that last slide example. And of course, there's going to be extra cleaning costs. When you go to option 2, the pro is that it's almost normal, because you have live teaching during every class, but you'd have a reduced number of students physically present, and it gives family 2 good options for 5 days a week learning. If there's any cons to it, it would be if there are any technological issues at the home end, and you also have to be very careful to protect student privacy, because you're Zooming live from homes all over the community into the classroom. So we have to be very smart about how we do that, so that, the kids are on the back side of the camera and things of that nature. Certainly Zoom students have a little less access to services and activities that happen, because there are activities that happen during the school day that they probably wouldn't be able to partake in. Might be clubs having a fundraiser in the lunches, or there's no way to participate in that club on that day, that kind of thing. The con would be if—
But they would still have access to all the extracurriculars,
Yes.
everything after
Yep.
school.
They would have access to after school things. It would just, they'd miss anything that happened
Right,
during the
absolutely.
day. Yep.
John?
And the other danger there, or the con, would be the size of classes. If too few people chose Zoom, then your class sizes would grow again. Brian?
I'm just thinking of a day on Zoom, 5 days a week. And I, along the lines of what you're saying, I imagine that maybe you or Peg could fill me in on what a daily schedule is like. But I imagine for a child at home on Zoom, there would be some breaks. For example,
Correct.
physical education or lunchtime. Or could you give me a sense of what that daily?
Well, I'll take secondary first. And then if Peg, you want to talk about elementary, you can.
Okay.
On a secondary level, if I have algebra first period at 8:08, I'm zooming into algebra. Now, the lesson may not be all 46 minutes. The lesson might be 32 minutes, and then kids are going to work on some problems, and the teacher's going to help, monitor and help at that point. So you have 32 minutes of kids locked on, either physically or watching the Zoom. And then now we'd say to everybody, okay, now I'd like you to work on these 3 problems. Kids in class, raise your hand if you have an issue. If you're on Zoom and you're having a problem, speak up, so that they don't have to be glued to a 46-minute lecture. And then at the end of the class, there's 4 minutes for passing. So the kid would have, theoretically, if the kid is on Zoom, I'd watch the lecture, then I would work on my problems. And if I have any issues with any of the problems or the questions, I could ask for help, just like the kid in the class could. And then I get a little bit of a break before I have to log into second period biology. And then that would rep. So every period you'd be logging into your new class, and you'd probably just have them all saved. Here's my Zoom link for algebra. Here's my Zoom link for bio. Here's my Zoom link for world history, and you'd log in at the start of the class, but you may not have to be locked on for 46 minutes. You may still be connected, but you may not have to be staring at the screen, which I think is important, that they get some screen breaks. Just like we want to try to find mask breaks for kids in a safe way. It's safe. I think it's a good, safe thing for kids Zooming in to have screen breaks as well.
I agree.
This is a new world, but we got to be conscious of their kids, and we got to be flexible with them.
Are there in the schedule some classes that a Zoom kid might not participate in, like physical education or something?
Yeah, we were having a conversation today of how does a Zoom kid participate in ceramics? How does a Zoom kid participate in some of these other electives? Cooking right across the hall. You know, there are some things that we have to flush out to decide, is a kid going to be able to do that? Is a kid going to take an incomplete for now and then maybe be able to do the lab parts later? You know, we're going to have to be flexible to help kids out, because there's a lot of families that, you know, they just, again, they're deathly afraid of sending their kids to school, and we've got to be flexible and considerate of that.
To that end too, with from the college model with the lab kits, and
Right.
we purchase lab kits. So if you're going to cook, this is your lab kit with all the things
Cool.
you're going to need, and all of that.
And we said that too with the family and consumer science teachers. If we can say, hey, next week, this is what we're going to cook. Here are the ingredients. If your mom can get them at Price Chopper, so you're ready for next Wednesday, because then you could cook at home. You know, it's a high school senior. There are examples where they could replicate, but it's going to take some good advanced planning on our part, because you can't spring on Mom, I need you to go to Price Chopper at 9:00 on Tuesday night, because first period tomorrow I got to cook. That's not fair to Mom to be running the Price Chopper, or Dad, so. Yeah. And that's where things like an incomplete, or maybe we change an elective for someone, or, that's where the counselors are going to have to help us work with the kids to tailor 1,600 kids in the high school times 7 periods. So what is that? 42,000 periods or whatever, or 4,200 periods. It's 4,200, right? And or some crazy number like that. So just imagine all the scenarios that could happen, and that's why we got to boil down. And we can't do them in this scale. We can't even do them on my level. It's got to be done with the counselor and the kid, for those things.
So I do have one question about this. I know obviously that the big talk is about COVID, but if we chose this option, I mean, there are plenty of other things, especially for those kindergartners that are like, this is the first time that they're exposed to things. But even at the secondary level, strep throat goes around, like all of these other things. So even if it's not a 14-day, this student has to quarantine, would those students, if they're sick for the day, they got a stomach bug, could they still utilize, and then Zoom from home so that they don't miss out on school? I mean, it could be a different pro that we're not, an unintended, positive.
And we haven't talked about that kind of minute details with our team yet, but that exact question came up with the meeting with the 4 school districts and the hospital yesterday.
Okay.
About the kid who gets strep, the kid who gets flu, who is a student, an in-person student. How easy is it for them to just hop on Zoom on that day? Their mom may keep them home because they have a fever or they have a sore throat or something, but they're okay enough to Zoom in, and now they don't miss. And now they get credit for the day, even though they're not here risking exposure to everybody else or whatever they got. So that's one of those unintended good consequences.
Absolutely. And they'll still get credit for attendance?
Go ahead, Jack.
Just what Jessica said, what I was trying to say earlier about kids, we may get shut out before, but again, if the child goes home sick, and it's a child that's physically attending school, and that child still gets credit, they go home, they shouldn't be in school, they're not feeling well enough, still in school.
Yep.
Still get credit for that day, like you said, they Zoom.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Just so they know if they have to go home for any reason, we can shut down.
Yeah. And I think probably what we'll do is probably create a cheat sheet to give to the parents of the younger kids of exactly, in case they've never Zoomed before, how to do it. Because I think probably anybody from 4th or 5th grade up has probably done it, but I'm not sure about the little guys. So we probably should prepare a cheat sheet sooner rather than later, maybe even on opening day, so that the parents know how to do it. Right. That's a good point.
John, just could,
5 days, whatever, they are still marked present.
As long as they participate in the Zooms, each class they show up to, they get to be present. That's revolutionary for us.
A lot of perfect attendance possibilities.
The kids are going to hate this.
Mom's going to say, you could stay home, but you're good enough to Zoom in, and I'm going to check your attendance on the Power School app at the end of the day, right? So Brian, you want to finish with your elementary?
On on elementary school, what a Zoom experience might be like.
I don't think it's dissimilar than Ron was explaining in terms of kids go in and they have center-based instruction. So the teacher is going to explain these in your 4 or 5 centers for the day. And it's not going to be all just on camera, but they might go on to personality for that activity. They may know it's a Pearson and read the story or have the story read to them through the computer or through the teacher. So it's not all going to be directly with the camera and so on. And it's now it's snack time. So I take half the class down to wash their hands and walk around the building, while the other half of the class have their snack and vice versa to make it back. So there certainly are going to be breaks when they go out for the extra reading. If they have DVOD with the classroom teacher, that's going to be a different person. Or when the music teacher comes into the room and presents the music lesson. So there will be a variety of options, obviously a variety of different teachers delivering the curriculum to the students as they are, whether it's in class or in person, there will be options of ways.
So Peg, one of my thoughts all along has been along the lines of IAs. To do the social distancing, you really do need another person in the classroom. If you're going to do hand washing with one group while another group is doing a learning experience. So that is a question that I was going to reserve for later, but do we have sufficient amount of staff to accomplish that, especially more so in those elementary?
I don't think that we have two people all day in every class, but every teacher has a finite amount of time that's dedicated to them with instructional support. There are more hours dedicated to kindergarten, and then it's scaffolded back to the grade. So everybody has some amount of time with instructional assistance throughout the course of the day. But again, kindergarten might have an hour and a half to 2 hours of one extra help in that classroom. There might also be a special educator coming into that, or TSS workers, or other people that are not necessarily the staff. But there are other people that are going into those groups as well, speech providers, therapists, and so on that push in at various occasions like that. And then in the upper grades, that kind of is weaned off quite a bit, honestly, because it's just more help, more hands are needed by the others.
John,
Yes.
I do have some questions on option 2. I personally like option 2 the best because I think if you're willing to send your child to school 2 days a week, if you're willing to send them 2 days, you're going to send them 5. But it gives a nice option for others. I like what Jessica said with the, if we wind up, the big question that I have is if someone comes down with COVID, what then happens? And I've got some experience with, getting the letter of they may or may not have been exposed, blah, blah, blah. So it gives then to me, a parent who then is trepidatious about sending the child back to school, an option to go on Zoom.
Right.
But what I really like about it is if you go on the cyber, take the money out of it. If you want to start your child on an initial 9-week of cyber for the start of school, and then vaccine comes up, this thing disappears magically, and we get to go back normal, and you want to send your student back to school, they're on a whole different wavelength than their class is. But if they're able to zoom into the DV class, they're on the same chapter of the same book, of the same curriculum, and they can come in without any loss there. So I think that right there in and of itself is huge. Questions I have about it though, and I don't know about Zoom, I'm a go-to-meeting girl for work. The privacy is an issue. So the camera, obviously the students wouldn't be on camera, but if there's disciplinary action that's taken, you have a child who has a meltdown, something of that nature, presumably it wouldn't be on camera, but it would be as far as being vocalized. Now, I thought about it, and the student who's at home doing the coursework would otherwise be in the class, but you might have other students and parents, and quite frankly, sometimes the parents are worse than the kids in spreading rumors and chatting on Facebook. That's a concern, is how do we protect that? And my follow-up to that is Zoom recorded. So is there then a history of that possibly happened? You know where I'm going with
Yeah,
that.
and what we found, and don't let me forget to come back to the cyber, because you made some really good points about that. What we found is after talking to other districts who've used online technologies like Zoom and stuff like that, if they have to reprimand a kid because he's out of his seat or he's pushing somebody or poking somebody, what you can do is when you're in the front of the room and you got your Chromebook, you can just press pause. You could talk to that kid, knock it off, get back in your seat, whatever, leave him alone. And then once he's back, then you hit play again. So you could take
so-
that whole,
and
and
that-
that's huge.
And so that's something that obviously the staff would be trained on. This is
Right,
what you do.
that would be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought about it, and at first I was thinking of the student who's home, but the student who's home, if they were in the class, would be witnessing it anyway. But then I'm thinking more of the other students that might, other kids, family members, and whatnot. So,
Right.
that's good.
Well, if a child has a meltdown, you don't want that broadcast to the world. You want to be able to get in there and pause it. Shut it down.
Exactly. Yeah.
John, something else that might alleviate some of your concern as far as that, I know with Zoom, if you hold up your cell phone to like whether you're trying to take a picture of a Zoom meeting or record something, it'll come up and say that you're not allowed to, that you need authorization from whoever like the moderator of it is.
Really?
So,
Now I gotta try.
Now I gotta try.
yeah, you can set it up that way.
Okay.
So but that might be something that teachers need to set it up that way so that you can't be at home recording your screen.
Oh,
Do you know
okay.
what I mean?
Yeah,
And-
I see. I don't know Zoom, so that's,
yeah. So that was something that I took a training and I was trying to like screenshot something that was on and I got like a big old error and I was like, oh,
So,
There are a
so
lot
those
of
are things,
concern.
protections we can put in there.
yes.
There were a
So
lot of
that might
concerns
help.
with Zoom early on. Remember last March when everybody in the country went to Zoom, or probably more than the country. There were a lot of concerns about Zoom bombing with people getting in and stuff like that. And they've upgraded their software multiple times. And now people have learned to use a password. And then everybody tries to come in. You set it up so they sit in a waiting room.
Mhm.
And the teacher, once they recognize them, they let them in. And you don't let them in until until you recognize them.
Okay, just a couple more questions on that. With, if you're doing cyber, you're getting a box at home with all of the books and the paperwork and everything. So how would that work for these students? Obviously, they've got to register at some point ahead of time to let us know that's what they're going to be doing. But then even just things that needed to be printed, tests. I'm assuming they're not doing that on the computer because they're doing the coursework with the class who is in person. So is there a way for them? Not everybody's going to have the ability to print what is sent to them. What's the protections for like, if I'm sitting in the classroom, I can't be Googling my answers. If I'm sitting at home, I probably can.
Believe it or not, my son just took the praxis exam to become a teacher, and he was allowed to take the praxis exam at our house. And there was a whole set of procedures that had to happen. It started with moving his computer all around to show what was around. He had to have his phone in view but out of reach during the test. There's all these different mechanisms that the praxis exam that teachers take. They used to have to go to a testing center. It's all done. They have all these procedures that we can train teachers to do to ameliorate all those potential issues. It's amazing. Literally, he took the praxis exam in our front living room, and he had his phone over here on the coffee table about 10 feet behind him, but was in view of the proctor at all times. Can you believe that? I mean, that's the kind of thing. And a lot of these nitty gritty details we have to work out. We have to do teacher training and things of that nature. But yeah, there are ways that there are bigger fish than us that have done these things that we're learning from.
And you'd have to figure them out for any of the
Options, right, yeah.
options. Yeah, option 2 just to me makes the most sense. Because again, if you're going to send your child to school, whether they're here 5 days or 2 days, they're exposed to and quite frankly, if they're only here 2 days and you've got grammar school age, even middle school, they're going somewhere those other days if you're working.
Right.
So they're getting exposure to even different people. But yeah, I really, in thinking about it, I loved the idea that you could be, if you're a little worried about it now, but you could be online with your class. So if it opens up and you can come back,
Yeah.
you don't skip a beat.
And that's a great point because if you choose cyber, you're in it for at least the marking period. So you can't start the school year in cyber and at the end of September say, geez, everything seems to be going great. I want to come back. No, if you choose cyber, because we have a cost to that. So if you choose cyber, you're in it until the market period ends in early November. Secondly, people need to know that if they choose cyber, they're not getting a DV teacher. They're getting somebody else. They're Pennsylvania certified, but they're probably people who didn't get jobs in real districts, so now they're teaching online. The third thing is that they're not going to get live instruction every day in a cyber program. Sometimes there might be a video, sometimes it's read this and do this. And I don't, because people may not know about cyber, so I just wanted to bring those points up for people at home that are saying, geez, cyber is interesting, but I don't really know anything about it. So you're in it for at least the market period. It is not DV teachers, and it is not guaranteed to be live daily instruction. That's the advantage Zoom has.
And on that point too, though, the research just supports synchronous learning much better than asynchronous, not live versus live. And the research is, it's hands down that having live instruction is so much better for the child.
Right. Jack?
So I agree with Dawn that option 2 seems like our most viable. However, I think we'll need a lot more folks like Dylan to be in every school. And I'm serious about this. If teachers are having problems and the kids are having problems, we need someone who can rush in there. Otherwise, we're wasting a period or wasting 20 minutes. And the other thing I wanted to say was, if you're going to do another survey, I think we need to say things like, if Pike County stays in the green, can we count on you to commit to coming to school or commit to all-day Zoom? And it will give you a little firmer idea as to how many people are going to option for Zoom, at least for the first marking period. So if you're going to do another survey quickly, and I think it needs to be done the next 2 weeks, maybe you can get some commitments subject to if we're in the green. And we need to be flexible. If we move back to yellow, we need to have even more Zoom capability. And heaven forbid we go back to red. Everyone will need to know how to use the Zoom equipment.
Right.
I was in a meeting with 55 other people on Zoom, and everyone had a little box, and you couldn't even tell who was trying to talk. Maybe that's happening now. I don't know. But it really is important that people know how to enlarge their screen, get bigger screens, use their laptops in a way that they're not using them now, and to have students on a daily basis have a place where they go for school in their home. Not one day I'm on the couch, the next day I'm in front of the TV. We have to educate parents that there needs to be a place in your house that they know when they go to that area, that's for school. And there's no distractions, and there's nothing in the background that are going to distract the people who are looking at them. So it's really important that we have that criteria set up with our parents. A lot of parental education has to take place in the next 5 weeks.
Right. Yeah. And we did a lot of this also, or a lot of these different issues popped up in the spring. We had a mom jump into a lively debate in a social studies class. And we had to say, ma'am, thank you very much, but we got to let the kids learn. Right. And they learn by they being part of the debate, not you, So the goofiest things do happen. And I'll give a shout out to Dylan and our tech crew. They were working remotely most of the spring because we were home. Everybody was working from home, and they had to work remotely, and they were killing themselves to be able to remote in and do things to help our teachers. Right. And it was, people thought they were home eating bonbons, and they were getting crushed. They were getting crushed with work.
And I'm very serious about more Dylans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If you could replicate yourself, start now.
John, I would stay with, again, what Jack and the only ones I can hear, and Dylan, it's not a reflection on you. This format to me is terrible. I don't ever want to go through this again, yelling 40 feet down the hall.
That's what the earpiece is for, buddy.
Yeah.
If you put the earpiece in, you'll hear everything.
I put the earpiece in, John, and there's a delay on you. So I got one earpiece in like I'm in a recording studio and one out. There's a delay on you. You're coming in stereo.
Them both in.
So anyway. You're not going to get a better education. I think everybody agrees here. That's why we're all here. That's why we're all here. can't do it that way, that's the second option. To me, that's the only option that's not a recorded application. From my own. So that's what I would do. But I have a lot of questions that I gotta ask people that are actually doing this, teachers. So maybe at the next meeting, or we can get a hold of somebody that been here, because those are the ones I gotta ask. Those are the ones that are actually gonna be there. I have to know if this is gonna work and what their feelings are. I got 50 questions that I need to just ask the teachers themselves. Those are the ones that are there. So I think they have to be represented. I couldn't have somebody here tonight, but
Well, they're not allowed to be here tonight, Jack, but they would have been had it been a public meeting. But we do have
they represent the teachers.
the, we do plan on, to both Jack's point, in the slides you'll see in the future, and it was in that timeline ahead of time, but the timeline comes up slide again, and in there you'll see about surveys for next week. Both a parent, under these scenarios, which would you pick? You know, so that we
Green,
know,
yellow, red.
and then a teacher survey about what issues do they have, so that we have 6.
That's not a discussion. You know, before, John, I'm very serious about, I'm sure everybody in this room is very serious about this. This is people's lives and people's livelihoods. We have to protect the teacher, we have to protect the child. We have to give that child the best education possible. I don't know about everybody else here, but I need to have a discussion with people that are actually going to be in the rooms. That's how we made our construction sites safe. We didn't go and ask the corporate VPs or the heads of hospitals. We asked the people that were actually working. So, I mean, the teachers that are actually going to be teaching this and dealing with this every single day. I need to know their input.
You're muted. You got muted somehow.
Oh, well,
We talked about there would have to be some kind of
maybe they don't want us talking to teachers. I don't know.
week or what it is. There's some kind of leave so we can,
This is frustrating. That I know they don't want to do this type of meeting.
and all that will be fleshed out in the next 6 weeks. And because, I mean, you guys have to understand, there are lots of things that are going to change between now and August 31st. We have to stay conceptual right now at this level with the board while we work out the nitty gritty of all the details. And we're working those. We have all these committees, which you'll see in future slides, that are working on all these things, you know. That's why I didn't ask you to approve a health and safety plan tonight, because there's too many unknowns in July. You know, what the goal is tonight is to educate you about what we're doing with options that we want to put on the table for you to see and consider and deliberate over, and to tell the public about what we're doing with health and safety, which we haven't gotten to all those slides yet.
Is there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally. Right.
I gotta take a break from this shit. I can't hear a thing.
And we figure that as long as health-wise things progress in a positive way in Pennsylvania, that each week we'll have more, every Monday, there'll be more kids showing up in class. If things get a little shaky across the state, you'll see some families opt to Zoom, and next Monday, you'll have a few less kids. And that's gonna ebb and flow every week, I would think. You know, as we, you know, right.
So,
oh, sorry.
ready here.
And what we do is when new students register, we tell them it's at least 3 days. from the time they register, because we got to put them in a class, we got to give them a bus. Now, fortunately, we don't have to put them in a class or put them in a bus. We just have to give the teacher some advance notice that starting on whatever day it is, you're no longer going to have 15 kids in your second period class, you're going to have 18 because 3 more are coming back. We just don't want a kid to show up tomorrow without permission that I'm not a Zoomer anymore, I'm here. There has to be a little leeway. And obviously we could say week to week, if you sign up for a Zoom and you decide you want to come back, Monday is the reset day. You'll call us by Friday and say, on Monday, I want Susie back. Well, what we figure is that if people are not coming back, if they're going to go Zoom, they're going to go cyber, they're going to go homeschooling, they're going to have to tell us before school starts. We're going to have to put out a drop dead date that if you don't notify us by this date, you're coming back to in person. So that way the default is in person. And the survey says 85%. That might be a little lower, a little higher, depends what the climate is at the time. But that's the default. If you're not going to come back in person, then we'll have everything on the website of who do you contact. This is who you contact if you want homeschool. This is who you contact if you want DV cyber. This is whom you're going to contact if you want Zoom. And then we divide all that out because it could be overwhelming.
Yeah, I can't hear her.
No, and we don't want to do that. It's only if they leave us to go to DV cyber. They can come back next Monday. We're saying if you're in Zoom this week, you can come back next Monday. Yeah, so it'll be yeah. That gives us the nimbleness that, hey, okay, we got 2 more kids that want to come back next week. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Now, on options 3 and 4, let me tell you the difference. And let me summarize it for you for expediency. Option 3, half the kids come to school or Zoom, while the other half do independent work. Option 4, half come to school, other half do independent work. That's if we weren't doing Zoom. So that 50% can be in person or Zoom, while 50% is home doing independent on an alternating day schedule. Option 4 is if we don't have Zoom for whatever reason, it's that choice is you're in school or you're home independent. The Zoom, that's if we didn't have Zoom. And some districts don't have the technological capabilities so that they can't offer something like Zoom. So that's just literally the difference between 3 and 4 is Zoom is capable. There's no Zoom capabilities under 4. I tried to finally figure out how to boil it down to make it easier to understand.
And I think that, as far as the con being that you're only getting 90 teaching days is a huge con,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. So, I think that while option 3, to me, if we have the capability of Zooming, then I don't think that option 4 to me is off the table.
Right.
I
That's
don't
a
think
worst
that
case
there's need
scenario.
to work independently at all. Do you know what I mean? Like if we have the capability to Zoom. But to me, listen, if we move to yellow and we are mandated to only have 50% capacity in a classroom, well, then we may have to move to option 3. But I feel like, for me personally, and I know some other board members have said basically the same thing. I think that option 2 is the best option to start with. And then then option 3 would be if we had to, and then obviously
And I agree with you guys that in green, we're option 2.
Right.
And then if need be, if something happens and we go into yellow.
Yes, then we move to option
consider
3, and then red obviously
red
would
is
be option 5. Right, I agree.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier. The whole thing is just a spectrum.
Yeah.
Of where we are in certain situations. So.
And we're very lucky technologically that we have these options to offer families.
Absolutely.
We are fortunate.
Absolutely.
And then if you just go to 5 for me, Dylan, option 5. Again, this is 100% online. This is if we're in red and no one's allowed to come to school. The pro of this compared to last spring is that we could still do live teaching every period. It's just that 100% of the kids are Zooming now. No one's in person. The con of it is obviously, you have less social interaction. You worry about kids that are, they all the social emotional issues that happen when kids, they don't have they're in isolation, they don't have social interaction, depression, you worry about those things. It doesn't happen to everybody, obviously, but we've certainly had our social workers and counselors working overtime with some kids this spring because they've been trapped at home and sometimes home alone all day because mom and dad or essential workers went to work and they're just home and they're out of their minds, bored and depressed, and it's serious. So mental health is a big component when we come back as well.
I have two things about option number 5. First, I think that it's important for especially those that are viewing and then obviously the rest of the parents to know that option 5 and going online is going to be very different than spring. And I don't think that we can say that enough times, because I know that one of the biggest things was about the just the disconnect between some classes and the level of instruction of different teachers and so forth. So I think that that's very important for them to know. And the other aspect of that is that is the mental health aspect. If they're Zooming every day and they still at least are seeing their friends in some of their classes, that they may not, I mean, there were some classes that didn't Zoom very much at all. Now they're at least going to see some of their
check-ins.
Absolutely. So I think that that will be a big change from the spring. And I know that obviously that the privacy issue is a problem, but is there a possibility, because Zoom does record, if we were all 100% instruction via Zoom, is there the capability for us to record those sessions to then put on Schoology?
Yeah.
Sorry, Schoology, so that, those kids whose parents are working, I mean, you're going to have kids that are home by themselves. Is there then the capability for them to to view that live session later in the evening when their parents are home, so that if they, or if parents, couldn't manage to get them on at a certain time, they still have access to that. So that's just something to consider.
And I know that worked for some classrooms as well, because in the spring, there were teachers that simply uploaded videos. They recorded videos in advance and then uploaded them, and then kids could watch them when it worked for their family schedule. And that's the same idea when you do the asynchronous videos that are recorded.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know it's not ideal, but, listen,
It's a great backup
there are
plan.
kids that work at, Price Chopper, and that our students are essential workers, that they are working during the day and they can't access that, during our, during the live feed. So at least that would give them the opportunity to view that
Now,
later.
the one difference between last spring and this fall, if we had to go 100% online, there's no way a kid will be able to keep up if there are going to be 7 live lessons a day. If you're a high school kid and you've got 7 classes, they're not going to be able to work 9 to 5 somewhere, because they'll get swamped. They had the flexibility in the spring because the workload may not have been as bad, but they have to be prepared to do a full amount of workload, and I just want to tell kids that in advance. They don't want to start doubling their hours just because they're learning from home, because they're going to get swamped. Although the trade-off is, if they're involved in extracurricular, co-curricular activities and sports, they just found a lot of time, because if we go 100% online, that pretty much cancels everything. That's the end of drama, sports, clubs, everything, because if no one's allowed to come to school, then all those things disappear. Jack.
Recently, I took a class online. Over 400 people attended it. However, we were allowed to record it, and therefore the live portion, if I couldn't make it that morning, I could go back that night. We're not going to have that option here?
No, we just talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry.
No.
We talked about having that.
Talk a little louder next time.
So you're saying our students who couldn't make the third period would be able to go back later in the night, hit the button, and watch the third period?
What we found is districts are doing 2 different things. Some districts, they've worked with their teachers association and they're okay with the recording because of the idea of, if something happens, you stop the tape so that there's nothing inappropriate on the tape or anything, or no privacy issues. Other districts are okay with their teachers Zooming live, but their associations are not okay with it being recorded. So what has to happen there is, if if that's not allowed in a district, and there's some neighboring districts that are recording and there's some that are not going to record. What has to happen though is for the teacher, now the teacher is going to have to do something else for those kids who cannot watch it live. If they can't show the class recording, they're going to have to do other work. They're going to have to do two things. They're going to have to prepare a lesson for the live, and they're going to have to prepare a lesson for the kids who can't watch the video. So we have to work that through, and that's a labor issue.
And I think one of the things we need to remember, this entire scenario is about illness. So if we have students who are opting out of coming to our facility and doing Zoom at home, most likely there is an illness or an anxiety or something associated with that. But if there is an illness, they need to have the option to go in at another time and get those lessons. So I really do hope we can pursue.
Yeah, I think but in this situation with what we're up against here, most people who choose Zoom will be, not that the student is sick, but just the fear of the virus and them carrying it.
Which is part of the
Yeah.
entire scenario, and the illness. Anxiety is an illness, the fear of being here.
But if you choose Zoom, the idea is you're coming to class every day. You're just coming virtually, not in person. But they're making that commitment. I'm still
They're
going to
have the same accountability.
Yeah, this is not
And that actually,
correspondence course.
that
This
actually is a
course
good
you buy
thing.
online.
Or they have some type of
you know.
504 plan that
Yeah, but remember, that's a small percentage of the kids. We got to think
they would get around if there was a health
Again-
issue.
Again,
then they would
special
have-
ed is a small portion, and they have their own set of rules.
Yeah.
And that's why each one has an IEP, or a 504 agreement,
So if they do have that agreement, do they have the option to get the work?
Well, the bottom line is if they're special ed, they'll work with Cheryl and Diana and
But if it's a health,
to
if it's
work
a
on-
health
to work on
related,
that.
if it's health related, and they have a 504 plan.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying it's a great idea if they can take this at another. What if they're, sick and during the day and they're feeling better in the evening? I like the fact, or on a weekend, that they could, if this is recorded, that they could go in and make up the work.
And again, that's a labor issue that we have to negotiate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so that's
something to
maybe-
be
I
discussed.
don't know where Jack went, but that's maybe some of the things that Jack wanted to
Yes.
ask.
I would like to see that added to a
representative.
discussion.
If I can, because with all this talk about recording and whatnot, one of the things that I like about option 2 is that it gives those kids that are staying home some accountability. To me, and I don't know if you've thought it through this much, but they should be there for attendance. And if they don't show up, if their parents are working and that middle school or high school student isn't on the Zoom,
They're absent.
right. And the parent should get the email and the text and the phone call and everything else. So the parent knows little Johnny isn't doing what he's supposed to when you're not there. So to me, it's that routine that everybody has lost. If we go to option 4 or 5 or whatever one it is, and we're all on cyber, then it's a completely different story. But right now, if you're choosing for your child to stay home because of COVID fears or whatever the case may be, they need to be on there. If they've got an IEP, just like if they were in the classroom, there's going to be certain things that are allowed. If they're sick, if they're truly sick, you probably shouldn't make them Zoom that day. They should be on the sofa, drinking chicken soup.
If they're too sick to
have the
Zoom, then
ability
they're
to get
absent,
the
just
information.
like any other day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're hearing, I think amongst the board, and I think it's option 2 is just because it allows so much flexibility.
Flexibility,
like you
right.
said, because we got to think about the 4,500 kids in the district, and every child has something different.
Right.
So
Every
what it
family
does,
is different. Every student's
absolutely.
situation is different. And that's why I don't want you guys to obsess about individual
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
We'll
So
work those out for
so
kids.
theoretically, option 2 gives 4 different options.
Right.
Really, with it synchronous, live, in person, cyber, homeschool.
Yeah,
You can go
right.
through the gamut, and each family can adapt to what fits their needs. So I think that's really what we're hearing tonight.
So if, to Pam's note though, so if, and I do understand that, like we're talking about recording them for option 5, where you have to be home, everybody's home. But for option 2, if we're not recording those sessions, and let's say there is somebody that's quarantined at home, even if they don't have access to the live stream, they would still though have an assignment. So
Yes.
if in class they learned lesson 5.1 and the teacher taught it and then you were doing those problems, that student would still have the accountability, just like if they were in school and got those papers home on Schoology.
Yep, you got it.
Gonna get it before the end of tonight's meeting. On Schoology, they would then have the lesson that they would then complete. So even if they don't have the live teacher version, just like they wouldn't get if they were sent home from school, they would have it on
They'd still
online.
log on
Yeah,
and do
they
their
wouldn't
work.
have
It's
it,
like
they
a
would have-
visual,
Exactly.
packet.
Instead of getting
Okay.
your textbook from school that day with these are your assignments, on Schoology.
Bug?
Oh yeah, it is really a big bug. On Schoology, you would then
Corey will
complete
get it.
that assignment.
Oh, it's one of those.
Corey, you want to fling it with a piece of paper?
It's just a cricket spider. It eats all kinds of little bad things.
I'll just move it.
Yeah,
This way.
sorry. Yeah, we'll just.
Dylan,
Yeah.
you want?
Right.
You want to go with it.
That's what happens when you're closed.
Now
Close to
districts.
you, please.
Step on it.
Sorry.
Now, districts in our region, just so you know, on this next slide, of all the districts I've spoken to, almost everyone is trying to come up with some kind of way for elementary to come every day. They're not looking for an alternating day schedule for elementary kids. They are looking at possible alternating schedules for secondary, just because there's a million reasons, not a million, but there's a bunch of reasons why the little guys, why an alternating schedule is problematic for lots and lots of families. Conversely, on the secondary level, it's about a 60-40 split of all the schools I've spoken to in like IU 19, IU 20. About 60% are trying to come up with some kind of plan for 5 days a week, while about 40% of the schools are coming up with a plan for alternating days. But there's a lot of different factors. Take a giant district like Bethlehem, who's in our IU. Giant district, very old buildings. They don't have digital HVAC systems. They don't have air conditioning. They have small rooms. So their constraints are very different than ours because we've invested significantly to have all these things. And so that's why, somebody like a Bethlehem is looking at alternating days because they've got 32 in a room and the rooms are smaller than ours. So they don't have a way. They're packed in there. So it's about a 60-40 split. Well, I want to just turn to health and safety just to try to fill you in on what we've been working on, who we've been working with, et cetera. As you'll see, here are some of the organizations we've been working with. Obviously the state departments of health and education, a lot of guidance from the CDC. I had mentioned Bucks County earlier in your gray folders, that they're the county department of health that's kind of taken the lead, at least on the eastern side of the state, to provide guidance. Our nurses have worked with Maria on a variety of things. And even though it's summer and they're off, they're still in contact with Maria all the time. And we thought of this and we've got a solution for this and how do we do with a kid who might show symptoms? How do we isolate? How do we get them out of the building? What's the protocol before they come back? All those things they've been working on with Maria. And then finally, Wayne Memorial Hospital. And I want to talk more about the hospital. If you go to the next slide. Bless you. You must be allergic to that bug.
Turning around.
We formed a Wayne Pike Regional Task Force with the 3 schools in Wayne County, Wallenpaupack, Wayne Highlands, and Western Wayne, along with us. And we've hitched our wagon to Wayne Memorial Hospital, and they have been incredible. Yesterday, I was at a meeting, and their CEO was there, and again, on their committee helping us. They have doctors and nurses, their outpatient care director, their medical director, their community health coordinator, even their PR department was involved, along with Pike County EMA, Wayne County EMA, Pike County Health, the health nurse, all the districts. And they gave us we reviewed all the things we're talking about with social distancing and buses and cafeterias and classrooms. And they gave us feedback on all those things. And they gave us some great ideas. We're going to have another meeting with them followed up. They're reviewing our health and safety plans for us. They've been tremendous. And one of the things we talked about was parent education about the virus, about the home health checks that we want the parents to do in the morning, what to do, what is involved in a home health check, what is involved if your kids show symptoms, who do you call, things of that nature. And they're going to create a video actually, because they have a little studio at the hospital. They're going to create a parent education video that they will give to all 4 schools so we can push it out on social media, put it on our website. They're going to create it. They're going to do it all for us.
Great.
So
Nice.
Wayne Memorial has been out of this world, tremendous, helping us and giving us that whole, okay, here's what we're thinking from an educational standpoint. You're the medical experts. Tell us where we're on target. Tell us where we should be modifying this plan because of whatever, you know, the research better than we do. And some of these people, you'll say, we're just amazingly brilliant. When we're talking about infectious control and infectious disease epidemiologists, it was unbelievable. I mean, so we are blessed that we have a really good hospital up in Honesdale, and they're working hand in glove with the 4 districts. So it's really great. Right?
Did you see, John, with the guidance that came out from PDE this afternoon? There's a sample. I don't know if it's, have you had a chance to look at that, of a checklist that every student who's coming to school is supposed to be filling that out on a daily basis? From what I read, that seems a little unrealistic.
Yeah, what we're figuring is that we are going to educate parents about what the checklist is, and then they're going to use that. We're going to give them a copy of that. That's going to go home in the summer letter and say, here's what you want to be looking for every day.
Okay, so we're putting the responsibility on the parent where it should be in the first place. Okay, yeah, because some of those questions I don't even think we should be asking.
And it was interesting that early on they were talking about taking a temperature. In fact, when I went in the hospital yesterday for this meeting, they took all our temperatures. Of course, we had to have a mask on. They took our temperature. But when I spoke to the doctors when we got upstairs in the conference room, in the Bucks County literature, you'll see, and they said this holds true across the country. Less than 30% of the people who end up testing positive for COVID-19, less than 30% show fever as one of their early symptoms. So the idea of the temperature is the cure-all, they said it really is not. More than 70% of the people do not show fever. They might show fever later, but that's not it. Though if you want a telltale sign, it's the loss of taste or smell. If you lose your taste or smell, you better get tested right away.
There's also, isn't it about 50% of the people COVID shows up as a gastrointestinal type of a thing as well. So you don't even have any of the upper respiratory things.
So, but it was very interesting because we were ready to have Maria order us about 100 thermometers at $60 each. Because we're figuring, how do we get 1,500 high school kids in through the doors and not have them all backed up against each other? You know, and then Ohio said, we're not doing temperature checks. We're going to have parents do the check. And then Bucks County said, no, temperature check is not worth your time and money because more than 70% of the kids will show other symptoms first. So really, I mean, we've gotten quite an education from our medical people.
And just one more question with regard to masks, because in the Bucks County, actually their guidance is saying that they don't need to wear them unless they're in hallways and whatnot, but sitting in the classroom, no, but that was dated June 30th.
Right.
With what came out today after the governor's order, or I guess it's Levin, they're now saying you have to follow it. That's what I'm reading. Am I reading that correctly?
I haven't read through the whole document yet. I was just skimming it.
Because when you said before that there will be opportunities for the kids to take them off, I'm hoping that's the case.
The guidance today still said that it's the same if they're 6 feet, if they're socially distanced 6 feet in the classroom.
They don't have to wear
they
it.
do not have to wear a mask. The cafeteria, the food one is interesting because you're only allowed to take your mask off while eating and drinking if you're 6 feet apart. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work.
Well, that's now you know why we need extra custodial help at lunchtime,
Right.
because we're going to have so many. Theoretically, we're going to have double the number of tables for feeding kids because we have to spread them out.
Did you see though in the guidance today though that one of their options and one of the things that they're pushing is for lunches, and I know at the secondary level it might be feasible, is for them to eat outside. So
and we have that option in a few schools. We have that option, if you'll see out here, outside this side door, right outside the main entrance, the 11-12 CAF, and right outside the pool, there's outside seating. There's also outside seating at DV Middle School. There isn't at Dingman's Middle School because their cafeteria is up on the second floor. So we've been brainstorming some ideas of what we can do for them. which really helps because your secondary cafeterias are much more crowded than your elementary.
Exactly.
So we have to be creative with them to help get those numbers down.
And I think that that's a very important thing for them as well, too. They have paid a significant price throughout
Right.
this whole thing.
Right.
And while I understand the theory of eating in a classroom, I do. I think that them having some sort of normalcy and being able to go to the
Right.
cafeteria, it's the thing that they look most
Yeah.
forward to, probably that in gym class during the day.
Right.
And I think that that's what we need to move towards.
My three favorite
Yeah.
classes,
Yeah.
lunch, recess, and phys ed, right? So- Okay, Dylan.
Just add one piece to this health part of this. Am I muted now, Dylan, or am I good? You are muted.
Okay, so I'm unmuted at this point, right? Okay, so I hear in the news all these things about medical and mess and everything, but I'm not hearing as much of the mental health part of it that I'd like to address when we talk about this. I mean, when I Zoom at home or I Zoom at work, it's a different surrounding. But now tonight we're very spread out. And I'm going to tell you, this has been one of the most frustrating experiences for me in the world. I try to say something and I'm muted. I have a disability. I don't hear really well after all these years in construction. I also don't see very well. But we have a lot of children in this school that have way more debilitating disabilities than I have. And I'm an adult, so I can get up and I can walk out, get a breath of fresh air and come in and sit back down. But I worry about the children that are going to get up, walk out, and not come back and sit down. Because with this computer on and off and half the board members all the way down and I can't see anybody to even read their lips. And that's the problem with the masks. People aren't able to see the mouth, and I hear so many of the teachers saying that they need to see my mouth to see the words. This is difficult, and it's very frustrating. And I'm a 57-year-old man. It shouldn't frustrate me. But how much more frustrating is this going to be to a child that's trying to get an education? So I think we're going to run into these problems.
We will. Yeah, we will, without a doubt. And the two things is that, A, parents will take that into consideration when they decide what option is best for their kid. And then also the kids in the more severely disabled, they're going to come every day because they have smaller class sizes, so they're not going to Zoom. But yeah, Jack, you're right. Every family has to take they know their kids best, and we trust the parents to make the right decision for their kids about what's the best option for them.
All right, I'm actually glad that this happened to me because it brought up a good point to my head. And I'm sitting here thinking, if this is frustrating to me, what about all these kids? And like I said, we have children in this district that have way worse disabilities than I have, and it's so much harder for them. And if I'm struggling here, I mean, God's honest truth, I haven't been this frustrated in years as I was here tonight at this meeting to try to just communicate. So, I apologize if I sounded a little bit off, but I'm trying to speak loudly, and then people tell me you're yelling, you sound mad. And, that's okay because I can sit here and make adjustments. But a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old child, or certainly any child with any kind of disability or special need, is not going to come back. And I do worry about that. And I worry about these kids. So that's why I asked because I want to talk to the teachers. I just want to be able to talk to them and discuss this with them. We're talking about, my first priority is the safety of our teachers and our students. My second priority is to make sure that they get the best possible education, which I personally believe is sitting in front of a DV teacher, whether it's in person or whether it's on Zoom. That's what I want for my daughters. I want them in front of a DV educator because that's how much I think of them. I don't want them going someplace else. It's not the same quality of education, and I don't want my daughters getting a watered-down education. But this experience tonight, I wish I had stayed in Maine and Zoomed. To tell you God's honest truth, I would have been better off. So maybe I'm one of those children that should stay home and Zoom, So maybe I'll ask for an excuse note next week and you won't mark me absent.
No, you'll be marked present. We can see you on the screen, so you'll be present.
Well, and I think the point is if you're in school, Zoom isn't going to be an issue for you because you're going to be you're really not going to even know that's going on.
Right.
You're just going to be in the class.
But there is going to be a distance where they're spread out and they won't be able to see each other's faces when the masks do bring up an issue on that. And I've heard that's so important, especially with the early education. So
I think you missed the conversation, though. We think they can still, if we can
spread
achieve
them out, they
6,
can remove
they
the
can
mask.
remove the mask. Yeah.
All I'm just trying to say is it can create a very, very frustrating situation. And that's not cohesive. I mean, we can all agree that's not cohesive to getting an education. Yeah, it's been frustrating, but we'll get better at it.
Jack's absolutely right. We can't hear you down there. And I think the setup would have been this part of the U school board, so we can look across at each other. And then, sorry? Yeah, it's still very difficult. And I'm a little bit like Jack, I'm a little bit deaf in here and I can't hear it at that area.
Well, the bottom line is we can go, if we can't have a public audience, we can go back to Zoom next time.
Oh, please do. Oh,
Yeah, please
can I
don't do
come to
that.
the district office then?
Yeah, I just don't think we'll be meeting back at the DO as a group for a while. And I don't mind this setup as long as these seats are occupied by my colleagues at that end and you folks can be down there. You're not saying a whole lot here. So I think that might be a better way for Jack
Yeah.
to hear what's going on, you to hear us, although I speak rather loudly. And the second item is, I think at some point we have to have a meeting with the teachers real soon. Whether you want the school board to be there or not, John, is up to you, I guess. But if 50 or 60 teachers say, we're concerned about coming back to school at all, are they going to be our Zoom army who's handling the Zoom end of things? Or what do we do with that? I mean, we can't hire 60 more people. We can't let 60 people go.
And well, two things. There isn't a Zoom army because everybody's going to teach their regular schedule. The teachers will be in their classroom teaching their regular schedule with a smaller group in and some kids Zooming.
But what if they decide we don't want to come back to school? Only 53% of your survey said they were ready to come back to school full time. So I'm concerned that out of our 370 folks, 300 show up, 70 say, I'm not coming.
And there are different options for those people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Family Medical Leave Act, there's use of sick time. We could even talk about an unpaid leave of absence. There's resignation and retirement. There's 5 or 6 different options for people.
Those are the only options according to the law right now that
Well,
they're not guaranteed their job.
We can't pay people to just stay home.
I'm not arguing with you.
An unpaid leave of absence would hold their position.
A leave of absence they would take. Not,
like a
I'm
furlough,
saying in the
I guess.
private world, people that are working at large companies will decide for themselves when they're coming back. And even friends of mine at the Pentagon said, we're not going back until we're 100% safe, a vaccine. Well, and the generals are all pushing for these vaccines by the end of the year. But if you're telling me that if teachers decide 20, 30, 70 of them decide they're not coming back, that they don't have an option of doing Zoom classes?
Well, the issue, Jack, is that the Pentagon in those scenarios, that works in an office environment.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work in any job that has supervision. Just like it doesn't work for the manager of Walmart. The manager of Walmart has to be there to supervise his staff. That's the issue. They talked about the quarantine back in March, really only being a quarantine for white collar office workers because everybody else had to go to work. It was a limited quarantine for just certain segments of the population. And the other thing I fear too is the taxpayers dialing in saying, listen, they all got paid. All of us got paid through June 30th. And our jobs were dramatically different or people didn't have to work at all for their salaries. And people are asking about the accountability measure too of what are you going to do for your salary? I mean, in option 5, if we go 100% remote, we have a big conversation at this table to have about furloughing people because we don't need bus drivers. We don't need IAs. We don't need people to do the fields. We don't need cafeteria, except maybe a couple people. 100% remote will be devastating to Pike County, to the local economy, because so many people could be furloughed.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Really scary.
I would like a legal opinion from Ashley as to what happens if X amount of teachers, anybody, employees decide they're not coming back till there's a vaccine or until they feel safe, what their options are?
To me, it's a personal decision. Quite frankly, if we had enough students, enough parents choose cyber, whether it be DV cyber or an outside cyber, if we had hundreds of them, between the cost to the district and less students in our seats, we'd be looking at furloughing teachers. It would be an unfortunate situation, but one that one that we can thank our governor for and COVID for and everything else.
No,
You know,
I thought the
I
teachers
think
were
it's a
guaranteed their jobs under the contract, which we agreed to. But you're saying,
And I think if we're going to go talking into the contract and, potentially about contract, we would have to go into executive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I think just circling back, I think it's John, that him and his staff will take the first stab, of course, conversations with the teachers. And if something like that were to happen, I think that's when it elevates to the board level, when we have to take action on one way or another, but more on the operational end about putting the plan into action is more on the administration piece at this point, at least.
Yeah, and I would hope that, like John said, once the plan is together, hopefully, because right now there's so many unknowns, people are just afraid of it.
Absolutely.
Right.
We were all afraid of
Yeah,
it
sure.
back in March, and now you've got different levels of fear. So
Quite frankly, I don't like, and I just got to keep checking, Dylan. I'm still not muted, right? I'm still good. Okay. I'm sitting here. I'm a union guy. I don't like any of that talk. I'd like to. These are the people that educate my children and all of our children. I have great respect for them. I'd like there to be a job for every single one of the employees that we have at Delaware Valley. I don't like to hear this word furlough. Just being a union guy, I don't like to hear that stuff. It just creeps me out. But that's why I would like to have them in here as part of this conversation, because they're a very big part of this cog. So I would like to say to the ones that say, I'm apprehensive, I'd say, yeah, I worked in hospitals. I was apprehensive. My wife was apprehensive. But our jobs, and my job specifically, we made it safe. So how can I make you feel safe where you return back to DV? But I need them here to have that conversation, or at least their representation, because we do not want to lose these people. And I don't want to talk about these words. I just want to know to them, look at me straight in the face. I'm Jack, the same guy everybody knows. Just what do you need from us to make this work, and how can we make this work? And I just like to include everybody in conversations because I find it's more productive that way. Well, we could do it executive, we can do it whatever to protect anonymity and all of that. I just like to have that conversation.
I think that's kind of my role, and administration's role, to have those conversations with the support staff, with the professional staff, and so on. We've been meeting with them almost on a weekly basis to go over things. For example, they reviewed the flexible instructional day plan. They provided some suggestions and things like that. Until we have an actual action plan in terms of we survey the staff, we survey the community, and find out, okay, if we're gonna use option 2, and that's the direction we want to go in, then we're going to lay out parameters for what that looks like, and we'll discuss that with the union and what kind of MOUs do we need to come up with in terms of their working conditions. We've already surveyed them to try to find out what kind of PPE equipment do they need, do they want. A lot of them want hand sanitizers and wipes available readily in their classroom, so Marvin's been stockpiling those things. But honestly, I really do believe that that's at the, I'm not in no disrespect, but I do believe that that's at the district administrative level and not the board, and that's why you hire us.
And they have union leadership. We've been meeting with the leadership. Both unions got this draft PowerPoint that I sent to you guys a couple days ago. And there's a variety of little changes in here that if you compare this to the one I sent you a couple days ago, you'll see a lot of little subtle changes. And they were recommendations from the union.
Excellent.
Of things to do. And what it boiled down is the last time Peg and I met with the instructional side leadership, they were concerned about membership safety. And one of the reasons why the leadership of the teachers union liked the Zoom idea is because they felt it wouldn't force the hand to make people who might have been very hesitant about coming in have to come in, which would then put more kids in peace. by having the Zoom would reduce the number of kids in seats, which they felt would keep their membership safer. That was the way they summarized why they were supportive of having the Zoom.
It also, I think, gives parents, where you might send somebody to school with, you know, a little bit of a fever or they've got a cough or something, because you can just put them to Zoom, providing they can do that with their home situation. I think you're more apt to keep kids home than to send them if they're ill too, which obviously keeps everybody healthy.
The thing you mentioned before,
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know, in addition to the Wayne Pike Regional Group, we have a DV reopening task force of our administrators. The task force is really the cabinet and the special ed administrators. And then we have 3 subgroups, elementary, secondary, and support services. And every week, their groups have been meeting to tackle different aspects. Okay, if less kids are going to take an example. What are we doing with kids? AM drop off, PM pickup, moving in the halls. They spent a whole day, our whole meeting talking about that. We're expecting less kids to ride the bus. We need to make sure we're able to accommodate 30% more of cars dropping kids off. What does our parent drop off look like at each of the 7 schools? Can they accommodate another 30% increase in car? You know, those kinds of things. That's what they've done. So that's what the task force, the subcommittee, every week they've been tearing apart. First it was AM drop off, PM pickup, hallway movement. In the secondary level, we're talking about kids only going to their lockers beginning of the day, lunchtime, end of the day, because that makes the halls more crowded. Kids are now cutting across a swarm of 100 kids coming at them to get to that locker, you know, and all the other issues of making kids carry books for multiple periods. So they're doing that. Those subcommittees, they're doing all that drill down. And a lot of questions that you talked about tonight are things that will be flushed out either with the elementary group, the secondary group, or the support staff group. In terms of health, safety, communications, I wanted to update you on, these are some of the things that have been going on for months, whether it's statewide superintendent calls, IU20 superintendent calls. All of us have job-alike calls. Bill meets with the business people, Peg meets with the HR people. We have been doing Chris Lordy with the safety. We also have the 10 county emergency management calls that Chris Lordy participates in. And then, of course, now we have the superintendent's calls with the 4 Wayne and Pike school. So all these Zoom calls have been going on for literally months to work and refine and try to get as much consistency as possible from building our district to district to district. So that you don't do something that makes you stand out like a sore thumb. Like, why in the world are you doing that? Nobody else is doing that. So we worked really hard in IU20. We worked really hard with our Wayne County neighbors. Okay, the next slide. We have to do some education. We have training planned. Thankfully, we have an in-service day the Friday before school starts. So we have some training that we can do where that whole day is booked with training. Some of that is COVID training. And some of that is trauma training because we're required to do an hour of trauma training with our professional staff. We also will not open on that Thursday with the big meeting in this auditorium where I have everybody in the whole district. Everybody will report to their individual buildings. Even the faculty meeting will not be all the faculty in the same room. They will Zoom in from different rooms. And then that will allow more time during that day. Because normally they might meet with me in the morning and then have lunch and go to faculty meetings in the afternoon. Now they'll go right to their schools, have their faculty meeting. And then if we need to do things with Schoology or any other thing, we can do additional meetings to help ramp people up. So that's where the staff training comes in. We'll be counting on our nurses and some of our teachers to do training of kids about healthy habits. You know, washing your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds, coughing into your crease of your elbow, all those different things. Signage galore. There's signs everywhere going up to remind them of the healthy tips. There's signage by all sinks. There's signage when you walk indoors of buildings. And then finally, the other is the mental health piece. We had this huge committee called the Whole Child Committee that was going to meet on, I want to say it was March 18th or 20th. And we had probably 30 some people from all around the district focusing on the whole child and particularly mental health. Of course, we disappeared on March 13th, but the social workers, the guidance department chair, Diana Bixby, they've stayed working every month. They've been working on more mental health stuff for the kids while they were remote, and what can we do for kids mental health wise when they come back. So they have a whole plan to help individual kids and small groups of kids and different trainings. So I didn't want you to think mental health was put on the shelf. It wasn't. It's still a burning issue, and we've got some great ladies who are in charge of that. Capacity. We've spent a lot of time working on capacity of what are ways we can reduce the number of students in school and the number of students on buses. And that's part of the survey too, to check the pulse. I talked about healthy habits. This will be part of the parent education and part of the student education. Water fountains will actually be turned off, because the last thing you want is someone putting their lips on the fountain. But the refillable part on the top for the water that will refill water bottles will be accessible. We'll allow kids to bring personal water bottles. Because these are just the minute details. There's a million of them. I just gave you a couple examples.
On the water bottles, I know at the secondary level, they need a doctor's note right now so we're saying that they will not need a doctor's note anymore. They just are allowed to bring a water bottle.
And that was enforced a long time ago because of vodka, because it's clear. True story. And that's why water bottles have been around on the elementary level, but not around on the secondary level. So, but you have to, in this environment, you got to have a little thing. And then again, there are some exceptions to masks for kids with disabilities and things of that nature. And then we're going to try to find ways to have small groups with proper social distancing so that there can be mask breaks for kids multiple times a day. I think that's very important for their health. Just like having it on is important for their health, having some chances for them to take it off is important too. And we have to orchestrate that. Okay, Dylan. Again, social distancing, everybody's recommending 3 to 6 feet. The doctors yesterday when we were at Wayne Memorial said, listen, 3 is a minimum, 4 is better, 5 is better, 6 is better, 8's better, whatever you can do, but 3 is your minimum. And you want to do that wherever and whenever possible. Buses, hallways, and cafeterias are your toughest areas. So it takes a lot of orchestration. There are some of our buses that are rostered with 3 to a seat, but not that often, except maybe sometimes at the Dingman's Elementary Primary. Not that often are there 3 physical seats. But Marvin is preparing to have vans ready that if we have overflow days, particularly early on when attendance tends to be better at the beginning of the year, we're going to have vans ready to go to certain communities. If there are, for whatever reason, there are too many kids getting on the bus that day where we can't do just 2 to a seat. The vans will be ready to swoop into Gold Key or swoop into wherever. It's a little extra cost, but it's a good precaution to help us until we can get a gauge of what's going on. Things like first kids on the bus go to the back seat and we load from the back to the front. So you have less passing of kids. These are all these little strategies that'll be part of our ramping up for the fall.
One of the other things, and I don't know if it was I didn't notice it under the old PDE guidelines, was about adding additional bus stops so that there was social distancing at bus stops before the kids even get there. I know communities make it a little bit difficult as far as gates and stuff like that, but I know that might be something else to consider.
Yeah,
well.
in a town, it's very easy to do. In a private community, most private communities, we only go to
That Morris Milford, they're going to be very easy. You just add some more avenues that you stop.
Marvin's off this week, but I really like that when I saw that today. I thought it was a good idea because when I was a kid growing up in town, it used to stop at practically every corner. And not the most efficient way, not the best environmental thing to start and stop either. But now you see much larger bus stops, and now we got to reconfigure that. We also have to encourage parents to keep your kid in the car. In the wintertime, they have no problem keeping their kid in the car, but maybe we don't let 56 kids all jump out of their mom's cars and all pile together. Yeah, that's a big issue, so.
John, part of the concern I had with you're talking about bus drivers coming in and the different people coming in, and part of the concern I had about the cleaners, and I understand you have your cleaning that has to be done and all the rest, but if I make this really simple, I say, what do we need to have inside a school? We need to have an educator and we need to have students. And then every person that we add to that increases risk. So that's why I was trying to say, could we get away with having the cleaning crew? Limit the amount of people that come into a school. Limit the amount of people who walk in the door and your chances are better. We need educators, we need students. who else do we need here when the educators and the students are here? And I think the more we were able to rein that in and go with skeleton crew and bare bottom, I think there's a win side to that in that we keep people, every person that walks in the door adds to the risk of transmission.
So that's a great segue to the third bullet of, regarding visitors too, because it's all the same thinking that you have, Jack. You know, severely limiting access, plexiglass dividers on the office counters, encouraging telephone or Zoom conferences with staff, whether it's an assistant principal or guidance counselor, teacher, you know, and not having people show up here. We're not going to let just people show up at the front door and try to get a conference with somebody. You know, people are not getting past the counter. And then also in movement, we talked about secondary lockers. The other thing we're looking to do is elementary specials. We're looking health, guidance, music. That will be done in the classroom. The teacher will go to the elementary classroom instead of traipsing the little kids down the hall to those classes. We're going to see if we can do elementary art for certain units. Some units are way too messy, so we will move them for those, but there are other ones where, you know, that we can do that. And then the protocols that'll be in place to isolate a kid that shows symptoms, how to safely, after we isolate them, how do we safely remove them from the building? And then the notifications that are required, getting kids tested, what is the procedure for returning to school? So all that stuff will be part of the health and safety plan. And that's not stuff we whip up. That's stuff that our nurses and health professionals are working on. That's not something that educators are going to do. That's not our wheelhouse. Okay. Still under health and safety, there'll be an increased daily cleaning regimen, both during the day and after hours. And then the school being disinfected, or what we sometimes call deep cleaning, will happen on a regular basis. Exactly when that'll be will be determined on what kind of strategy we implement with kids coming to school. Buses will be disinfected on a regular basis. What most of the time they're recommending is that the high touch areas get wiped after every run. So even between the middle or high school run and elementary run, and then they get disinfected nightly. They have the fogger sprayer. We bought one for our buses and one for Roar's buses. And then the other thing they really recommend for as long as possible to have windows open, because they said the windows open is tremendous. The doctors were talking yesterday at the meeting that it creates a negative, what is it, Jack? It's not negative airflow, but I forget what it is.
Well, it's negative air. You get a suction. Yeah, it's negative air.
You're pumping fresh air in the front and it's going out the back. And they said, whatever you do, don't open just the first window and the last window. There was something, they said it was all screwy, but get all the windows open even a little bit creates this.
All your hospitals have negative air pressure. Your laboratories have negative air pressure. We can create that exactly what he said. Open the first and the last window. We'll create it.
And then we used to disinfect the cafeteria tables after the last lunch every day. And then last year during the flu season, we started disinfecting them after every lunch period. So we will continue to do that. That's a new procedure that we started. I think it was January, February, when we had the really bad flu season, or we think it was the flu. You know, so that's something we'll do after every lunch period. And then again, I touched upon this before, is that our digital HVAC system is state of the art. We have spent millions of dollars on our HVAC system with digital controls. You can control things from your phone with an app, and having air conditioning in our classrooms. Most districts do not have that. So the fact that we have those is really a huge plus for our kids and our staff. Huge. I mean, we spent millions of dollars over multiple summers, like the summer of 13, 14, 15, 17. We've spent so much money, but now not only is it just generally healthy, it's become a huge plus for us to have this equipment in place.
John, on the buses, I was just going through the stuff that came out from PDE, and the one thing that question I had in my mind with, oh, I'm sorry.
Now I hear you.
When they're on the bus, they're going to be the closest, but they probably will be all day. And it does say that you have to seat them in cohort or family, because that's probably the if you're going to have an outbreak,
and you contain it to a classroom or a teacher for quarantining and whatnot, the bus took a whole nother, yeah, a whole nother layer. Thank you. So how on earth are we going to do that?
Well, like you said, there's a
With
couple.
different bus stops, and then it says load from the back to the front. No one sitting in the front seat. There's a lot of that. That's going to be a logistical. Good luck. That's going to be tough to figure out.
And I think what you'll see, at least initially to start the year, you're going to see many, many more kids dropped off.
Yeah.
Just out of extra precaution. If they have the luxury to be able to do it, I think they will. That's why we're preparing for a lot more cars at the parent drop off. But that will help our bus situation. That will help our bus situation. And then if you add the Zoom between the kids that get dropped off and the kids that are going to choose Zoom, both of those are our best assets, to help the bus situation.
Now, one thing that it also says, which makes sense to me, quite frankly, just a flu season, is when the kids are coming off the bus, have them wash their hands the first thing when they get in the class. That also is a logistical nightmare, getting everybody to the bathroom to wash their hands. Are we going to do hand sanitizer for them instead? Or are we going to get some of those outdoor sinks and they can get off the bus and wash their hands before they walk in?
And one of the options is they talked about having kids use hand sanitizer every time they get on the bus and every time they get off the bus. And we haven't gotten that far yet with our bus exploration. So, and Marvin's on vacation this week, so we won't even tackle that till next week. But there's some of the strategies that they're thinking could help.
So if we have, and obviously we're going to work on getting a plan as far as drop off and pick up at the beginning and the end of the day. So I know the legality of it is that we have to roster anybody that could attend in person. We have to legally have a roster spot on the bus. But are we able to ask parents if you are able? I mean, 67% of parents said that if we didn't have transportation, they would be able to transport their kids. So do we have the ability to say, can you please drive your kids to school and pick them up if you're able?
I mean, you can certainly encourage it. The way we figured is that we'll load from back to front, 2 per seat, and work our way forward and then see where we're at, and to find out where we're at. Obviously, like I said, I think a lot more people will drive initially, and then maybe over time they may loosen up. We all did that.
And I understand that, but
our own personal
perhaps
strategy.
they may,
But certainly,
if they're able to, perhaps if a nice ask, they may, say, okay, well, these, 30-something% of our kids do not have the ability of getting to school other than transportation.
Right.
Even if, 50% of the parents that are able to drove their kids, that's huge for those buses, especially to begin with. And then, like you said, as, when things are better and, and we're kind of loosening some of those regulations, then they start riding the bus again.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to
It's an
ask.
interesting ask. Yeah, it is. It'd be interesting to see. I originally told the principals to prepare for 50% more cars, and then I backed it off to maybe 30% more, but it could be 50% more. It really could. We don't know yet.
Right.
Maybe that if we do another survey, that'd be a follow-up, So, and then we can go to the next one, Dylan. Just about school visitors. We have to really reevaluate all our kids that go out into the community. Some are, for CTE programs, some are for special education. So we got to have our high school people sit down and evaluate everything that we go out for and say, are we comfortable doing that? So we won't have assemblies or other large indoor gatherings in the fall. No assembly, no pep rally. The 5 o'clock in the morning rally on channel, whatever, for before the football game is not going to happen. Those kinds of things. We've already canceled DV ACE for the fall, and we've canceled or told there'll be no indoor school usage by community groups, at least for the first marking period. If we're going to work so hard to try to sterilize this place, we don't want to then just counteract all our efforts by clean it like crazy when the kids leave and then have all kinds of community, one for parents and one for our teachers. Not all staff, just our teachers. And I'll tell you why. We already did a staff one, but my thought was to do another parent survey next week and say, if we're going with this option, which one do you think you're going to pick? And if we're going with this, what are you going to pay? You know, that kind of thing, and try to narrow the focus, and then tell them, if you would like more information about homeschooling, here's who you call or email. If you'd like more information about DV Cyber, here's who you call or email. By the way, here is the deadline if you're going to opt for something other than in person. You know, if you're going to Zoom, we'll figure out a way, either work it through the main office or the counselor's office or something. But we'll put a date in August at some time and say, people, if you're not going to do the default, which is in person, here's your deadline and here's who you contact. But what I'd like to do is I'd really like to do a survey of the teachers next week to lay out this information and get their feedback. And in the summer, email is probably the best way. And we can do a Connect Ed call to all their phones. So even if they're not home, they can get the Connect Ed call that says, hey, there's a survey for all teachers about these different instructional options. Please give us feedback on it. And we can do that. So they can do it no matter where they are. They'll get the phone call on their phone, and then they can just hop on their phone and do the survey. So.
And the second student survey, we should just make very clear that this is an additional survey, that even if you did the first one, we're asking you to do this one as well.
And I'll
so
tell
that
them
they
again,
don't
this
think
is
that
not
it's
the binding part. This is just
right.
to get more info.
Right,
People
but
were very concerned that the first one was binding. And I kept telling people when they emailed me, no, this was just to get a pulse of where our community is at.
Right, that's
And
another
I'll
good
let them
point.
know again, this is a second one. Everybody should do it. And it's not binding. The binding date will be sometime in mid-August. You know.
John, I have a question that might,
I don't want to overstep my boundaries there, and stuff, and I respect that position. I just hope you all respect that whatever the nine of us do here, doesn't affect our lives. I feel. So I just want you to respect that as well. But maybe we can put something in there where, you know, something more than one of characters, one of different characters, and suggestions. But make them feel comfortable, that way handle it instead of.
We only did that in the initial survey just to get feedback. Any other questions or concerns, but specifically instructionally, certainly should have that.
Yeah.
I just want anything we can do to get to them.
And we had people write me people wrote me paragraphs on the parent survey. You know, in the open-ended last question of anything, they wrote me they cut and pasted stuff from research journals. You wouldn't believe it. It took me hours to read those comments, hours and hours and hours, because most people wrote something. You know, and I read through them. It took a while.
Well, it's not a bunch of us work through it. And any day you have is here in my book. And we all had apprehension going into work. I know I did. And I just want to address those. I think any apprehension that any student has.
Dylan, you can go to the next one.
Any student take that seriously. So if you get those, write them to us. It would help me make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, I have a question relative to timeline. And it's something, it could go anywhere, but that's probably as good a place as any. What's the thing, a number of parents have asked me this, what's the thinking about athletics and what's the timeline to make any decisions given whatever the state of conditions are?
High school sports have already started their off-season conditioning. They're out there every night. If you drive by, you see all the cars, and some of the teams work out in the mornings. And the PIAA had their most recent meeting yesterday, and they're staying with their message that unless the governor shuts them down, it will be up to each individual school district what they're doing. So in other words, if there's an outbreak in Allegheny County outside Pittsburgh, and all the Allegheny County schools decide they're not going to do fall sports, but it's going to do it because they're okay, then sports continue on without Allegheny County. They're not going to.
School districts make that decision.
Yeah, it'll be up to the individual school districts or the individual region. It might be, we're in District 2 of Northeast PA is all District 2. You could have something where things go bad in District 2, and District 2 recommends. Things will continue to change weekly, if not daily. We put the survey out, and then the governor came out with the thing about the mask like a day later or 2 days later. Last week, they came out with Last week was they had all of a sudden all those states that if you came back from, you had to quarantine, and we had people on vacation all over, 12-month employees who are working. So they're running home and getting COVID tests and staying home, waiting for the answers and all that stuff. Yesterday at 3:30, out of the blue, they announced the 25 person limit indoors. You know, we didn't have any heads up on that. Today they released the health and safety stuff, even though school districts have already approved their health and safety plans. They did it at their July meeting, some people, and then the state releases the guidance after they got it. So now they got to go back and redo their health and safety plan and bring it back to their boards next month. And we may have to do that multiple times.
I'm hoping there's not another surprise, because it just seems odd to me that one day they'll come out with no more than 25 for any gathering, which would stop any community use of the school, quite frankly. But he comes out one day with no more than 25, regardless of the size of the room, and the next day PDE comes out with the school guidelines.
Right. Go figure.
There's no rhyme or reason to it.
There is some rhyme and reason to it. So let's just move on.
And then the bottom line here is, you know, we have to continue to plan for multiple scenarios. That's what all these things are, multiple scenarios. And then we have to continue to be flexible, because we know things are going to change. They've changed on us every week since March 13th. And then, but the bottom line is, I think the time that you invested tonight to talk about the different options has allowed families that are watching this, or who will watch it later as it's cataloged and available on our website later on. This is I think families now have a much better idea of what have we done, what are the things that we're working on, and what options are we leaning towards, so that now they can start thinking, okay, under this scenario, I got to start thinking about daycare. Under this scenario, I've got some different options. You know, and now families, if they watch this live or they watch it taped, now they can start processing, what am I going to do under each one of these scenarios? They don't have to wait for us to make that final decision next month, because it could ebb and flow based on guidance we get from the state and the feds, et cetera. But they can now say, okay, these are the couple things they're looking at. I now, as a family, I have to make a judgment. What am I going to do with my kids? And what are the ramifications with job, with daycare, with drop off, pick up? You know, now the wheels really get turning for parents, I hope, because now they have a much better idea where we're headed. Last slide. We really want to know what people think. So we welcome their input. We ask any questions they have, any comments they have, send them to this email address so that we can keep everything in one place. We don't want anybody's comments to get lost in the shuffle, because they send it to a principal, they send it to me, they send it to Marvin, they send it to Maria, or Peg, or whomever. Get everybody to send their questions and comments to this email address, which Chris Lordy, who's our health and safety, he's the leader of our health and safety committee. He checks this for us on a daily basis. But it also allows us to catalog everything in one place, so that our reopening task force can get printouts of all the stuff people are asking about, and we can kind of tackle answers back to people. Or that's a great point. We need help. So askdv@bbsd.org, and that's where we ask everybody to send their questions. We can also, Dylan, can we, for the sake of time, is there a way for us to archive all those questions, any comments they did tonight? Okay. Is there a way for me to review them tomorrow? Okay. I'll review them, and then I can dump them into the same position, because we can't at 10 o'clock at night. We've been doing this for God knows how long, but we can use their comments and their questions. And if people have questions, we can specific questions that are, you know, legit questions, not political statements or whatever. We can get back to them. If they've got an email there, we can get back to them with answers, or if it's just comments, we'll compile it.
Are there any legitimate questions that we should answer tonight that we have not already covered? And now if with option 2, which it appears to be where most board members are leaning, they would have the ability to then Zoom from home, so it wouldn't be an issue.
And we're going to have to be very flexible with attendance, because this is, you know, used to be suck it up, go to school. Now we're trying to get parents to do just the opposite. When in doubt, play it safe, you know? And the same thing, we probably won't have perfect attendance awards this year as part of the subliminal message of, listen,
Come on, listen.
well, we'll see, you know, but we probably may not have perfect attendance because it sends the message, send your kid to school no matter what.
Is there a way with those, I agree that you need to answer the questions that are in there, but even ones that are people making political statements,
Can we print them and give them to you?
yeah, is there a way you can copy and paste them and send it in an email to all the board members? Because those people they're on there, they probably would have been here and we would have been hearing what they had to say. And that's, we're their representatives. I think we need to hear what they had to say.
That's a great idea, because then that way you guys, at your convenience, you can sit and go through them.
Exactly,
And that'll
yeah.
give you a better feel for what the thoughts are.
So you'll make sure that they get answers to some of
Yeah,
their
if there's specific questions, we'll make sure they get answered. If there's comments that are good for our committee, I'll make sure the committee gets them. And then we'll figure out a way to copy and paste all this, and then we'll email it to all the board members so you can see everything.
It'd be nice if you could, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if it turned into like maybe an FAQ or something like that from their comments and questions on
Yeah,
there.
we can do
Thanks for that.
So as far, I know that, because I know that this is going to be the big question, and I know right now we have our reopening plan release date is to be determined. Our board meeting in August is August 20th, which is 11 days before school goes back. So are we considering changing our August board meeting, or so that we can approve that earlier? Do you think it would be ready earlier? When are we getting that? I think that to leave it to be determined, and I know it's going to change, I know it can change, but I think leaving it to be determined is very difficult for parents. I think they need a date.
You know, I've only really given it some thought the last couple of days, but I was thinking maybe we should move our board meeting up a week to the 13th.
I agree.
We have a meeting the 13th, and then we can blast it out for people who aren't watching on the 13th. We can blast it out via website, social media, connected call, all on Friday the 14th, the very next morning.
Right.
You know, get the word out.
Well, and it gives us flexibility too. If 2 weeks later we have to change it,
We
just
can.
throw another board.
We can do a special meeting if we have to make modifications.
Well, and I also think that that might be a potential, is having a special meeting prior to August 13th when you have at least a draft plan, because I think that I think approving a plan that we're getting that night is going to be very difficult. I mean, we just spent 3 hours. I mean, it wasn't all 3 hours about the plan, but I mean, I think that we might need a work session or something to
Well, the other thought I
at least
had
review the plan.
Because remember,
first.
the
I'm not sure.
health and safety plan is not the reopening plan. But what I thought I would do is, you guys all have a paper copy of the IU 20 plan, so that you can familiarize yourself with the template and all that. What I thought I would do is any changes we make, we would put them in red. So you can start looking at this now if you want. And then when I send you the red plan, the plan with the red line, you'll say, okay, I thumbed through this, I got a pretty good idea of what it's up to. And you'll see, this is nuts and bolts stuff. This is not stuff necessarily that, like, this is not easy reading. This is not the stuff parents are dying to know about. Parents are dying to know about the 5 options. But if you thumb through this now, and then I send you a red line version, and our thought was, our folks are working in the subgroups. They're working on it this week and early next week on any of the modifications. So next Friday is what? The
24th.
24th. So I could probably have it to you on or right around July 24th. So you'd have plenty of time to go through it, send me questions, anything long before the 13th. So you wouldn't be, because I don't want you to be up against a gun again. 50-page document.
Right. So, and just to be clear, and I don't know how, I'm not good at the Robert's Rules of Order, but to be clear, I think that there's consensus that we're planning for option number 2. Like, I mean, that's where just, and again, that can change at any time, but the consensus is that we're making that plan based on option number 2, and then we'll adjust accordingly, just so.
And then that faculty survey next week can give us what are all the potential things that could go wrong.
So that we can plan.
What didn't we think of? What do we need to prepare for? That we can use the teachers to give us all that feedback. so that we're ready to roll on August 31st and to do our training the week before.
And if we get the plan next Friday, theoretically, what we could do is pull the board maybe and see if we need a work session that first week of August. We'll just pull at that point, and see if it makes sense to have a work session that first week and then to vote on it the next week, to hash everything out. So I'll just send out something.
And the other thing is we won't have, much on the agenda for the August meeting too. So even if you want to if you want to move the meeting up a week and sync a lot of that night with the plan, we can do it all in one night too, because we're going to have another agenda like we just dipped through. It might be just somebody leaving here, somebody, there won't be much. We can save you a night. I guess I'm saying the agenda is so light, we can save you a night, so.
Yeah.
Well, I would just like to add one thing. After years of discussions about live transmissions of classroom lessons, and it's never been very popular, and it's not our job to interfere with your human resource responsibilities. But I must say, coming here tonight, I am most pleasantly surprised to learn that our staff is willing to do that. And I'm very appreciative. Because of that, we have a very viable option that I feel can work. So,
You're right on.
it is our responsibility somewhat to make sure we do have the right option. And so thank you for your work behind the scenes in that area. And thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys know, we have great teachers, and those of you who've been around a long time, Delaware Valley has always been a leader in technology. And so we have the technology, and our teachers are tech savvy, which puts us in a great place to consider an option that other places can't. So we're really lucky. We really are.
Can we relax some of the dress code on them? I mean, I just saw something about some teacher wearing scrubs. I really have no problem with that, But I mean, I'd like to see them comfortable. These masks, I wear them 12 hours a day. They're very uncomfortable, but you got to wear them. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure we have responsible teachers that they could have dress down Friday every day, instead of just not Friday, I'm just throwing it out. I'm just thinking it's an option
Thank you for the feedback.
to be more comfortable. You're too strict. You should have been with the nuns, John Bell.
Yeah, just one last comment. I understand, Jessica, you want 2 meetings in August, and I agree with that. So if we can get that on the agenda, I can get it on my calendar rather quickly.
So 6th and 13th?
6th and the 13th, okay.
Is that what you guys want?
I think preliminarily, I think, if everybody agrees, we can shoot for the 6th and 13th. And if we get the plan by next Friday, pull everybody that last week. And if we don't need the 6th, we can wipe it at that point.
Okay.
But we'll see what the board, is that all right?
And one last comment was, 20 years ago, we had the IBM fella come in. We talked about laptops on every desk, $3,800 per student. And here it is 20 years later, and we're actually doing it this year. Not only laptop on every.
For about 300 instead.
And everyone in every home.
300. That's exactly right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
So we have really progressed. We're a great school district for technology. We have moved along the pace, and it's really good to see. And if we can pull off the Zoom meetings on option 2, where everyone really can get into the classrooms, it will be spectacular. I don't think we ever go back, to be honest with you. So, we might not want to go back. Some kids want to be home. Some parents want them to be home. It's a new world. Thank you. Yes.
We may never have another snow day again, or a hurricane day,
Or Snowmageddon.
or Snowmageddon. But can these meetings on the 6th and the 13th, I can't keep traveling these distances. Can we Zoom them as well? Zoom in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be away on the 6th, so I would have.
And like Corey said, we can advertise work session on the 6th, board meeting on the 13th. And then after I send you the red line version, if it's not dramatically different than what you're reading now and you're okay with it, we can then scratch the 6th if we don't need it.
Could we make both not work sessions, but
Voting meetings?
voting meetings? And this way, maybe we'll scrap the 13th,
Because you might need a meeting later on in that month.
because you might want a meeting the following week,
Yeah.
just days
Depending on
before.
how things change, so that's an idea too.
Because anything we vote on is subject to change at the very last moment,
Exactly.
you
So
know?
the closer we get to the opening school, the better off we might be.
Right.
Do you keep the 20th or do you do the 27th in case we have to modify something?
I think you would keep the 20th, and then if there's a problem with all the technology we have now, we could call an emergency meeting and vote whatever we had to vote in 5 minutes.
In all honesty, if we were modifying something on the 27th, I think it would be the governor shutting things down, because what would you be?
Right,
You
yeah.
wouldn't have time to modify
And there is a
anything at that point.
disclaimer at the bottom about, there's some disclaimer at the bottom about it that this plan may have to be altered because of law or, some other regulations, things like that are way out of our control. There is so even though the plan could theoretically, we could open on opening day and part of the plan could be incorrect because the governor or the Secretary of Health or the Secretary of Education put down a ruling, regulation or a law, what have you, and then we would just modify it at the following meeting after, because you're right. On the 27th, it would probably be, they would be telling us, much like they did on March 13th, when they told us, you're done for 2 weeks, and then we reevaluated after that.
Yeah, but they told us at 2:30 on a Friday afternoon after all the kids went home.
Yeah, remember we did take a half day because we were ready for it.
That's
We were ahead of those guys.
by hours, but we were ahead of them. That was good on us.
9 o'clock the night before. That's the first time I ever called a half day at 9 o'clock the night before. That's for sure.
So for now, let's hold the 6th and 13th for now. If we have to back it up, a meeting later on, we could do that. We'll have enough time for flexibility. And Rosemary, you had something?
Yeah, John, several meetings ago, you had mentioned that there were a couple of staff who were going to do summer alternate and service programs for technology type things for people that might be interested in kind of tweaking their skills a little bit after what happened. Did those things happen, or did many people sign up? What was the status with that?
What we're doing is we're getting them ready for August, because what we find is in the dead of summer, people are all on vacation.
Okay.
So you do something right after school gets out, which this year was kind of bizarre at the end of school. Normally the week after school, there's tons of stuff.
Right.
And then we do it as we get closer to people coming back. So we have a bunch of things, and some of it is going to be around Schoology. We're ready to release. Right, Peg, you want to talk about your training today or?
We had a second meeting with the folks this morning, and we are going to be rolling out a variety of formats. And there's a self-study, self-paced class. There's also there's synchronous classes that they can get online. So I really wanted the self-paced class available to staff, because some people, if we schedule 4 in-services that are 2 hours long, not everybody's going to be able to get to them.
Right.
In the class size. But if we can do an online version where people can sign up and go through it at their own pace, I think that's really the best option.
Okay.
So we're going to try to have multiple options for people, and we're also needing to train the administration on
Right.
how to use the product as well. So.
And we have an unpaid intern from Bloomsburg who's getting her master's in instructional technology, and she's working on how-to videos related to all these different programs that we use. There'll be some that are geared towards teachers, which will be plopping on the academic pages, and then there's some that are geared for parents to help parents. That will go on the parents page on the new website. I hope you guys have checked it out. I hope you like it, the new website. And thanks to Ryan Bolton, he did all those pictures of the campuses with his drone and all those videos. I mean, it's just what that really adds so much to it, the video of the campus. Makes you realize how beautiful our area is. And that one of Shahola with the lake is incredible. Incredible. So I know that gives you a whole different perspective.
These technology programs, John, can I ask, does anybody in this room know what Seesaw is besides, or am I the only one that's ever heard of it?
Yeah, Seesaw, we used, our kindergarten teachers used it.
Oh, okay, so we already have it.
Our kindergarten teachers used it last spring when everything hit the fan. They were using it. It doesn't work for the older kids, but it's great for
Well, that's what I heard. It's the early education and these were all early education people.
It has a lot of limitations in terms of it will not link up with full classroom. You can't post videos very easily with it. So it's ease of use. However, it doesn't have the functionality in some of the other.
Yeah, they were just mentioning that now you can hook it to Google Classroom. So maybe they came up with an extension of VAL or something like that.
But that's why this keeps everybody under the same umbrella, and it links to, especially in the elementary, which is great, it links right with our textbooks on the elementary level.
Oh, okay, I
So
got
they
you.
can pull right from their smartboard lessons and right from all the things that they have right into that format. And it also goes right into their grade book, so teachers won't have to do additional grading or any of those other kinds of things. So it's, I mean, it is new, but it will be seamless once teachers get through the training. So this seems to be much better to have a universal product that everybody can work in, and it'll be and it's very similar to Google, but it actually is better because it's more common.
I think it'll be easier for the parents too. Do you know? And I did hear wonderful things about Seesaw, especially from, those elementary parents. But I know that, passwords was a problem, and ClassLink helped with that. But there was still, you had a different, username and password for, 5 different apps. And that was difficult for parents to, and I know Seesaw helped with that. But I think having the same platform for a kindergartner and, a 6th grader will make it easier for those parents, for those kids that are Zooming from home and, absolutely.
To have everything in that one management system. Corey will tell you from the college level, it will make everything so much better this year.
There's just so many technologies out there nowadays. As soon as a situation hit, I bet every salesperson in technology must have been just on their phone
Drooling.
24/7.
Yeah, they were drooling.
It's been amazing.
Speaking of technology, just because we got a lot going on over the next month, and sometimes, Dylan, this is a question for you, the one and only Dylan Tech Guy. So sometimes in the past, our phones would stop giving us access to our email,
Password or something?
password stuff. If that happens, is there a way to contact you? All right, so if we just call Julie and say, I can't access my phone, can Dylan fix, can you do that remotely if we get on the phone with you?
I make that call
Okay,
every few
terrific.
months.
Okay, excellent. Good.
Brian, if you just want to tell everybody what your password is right now.
Big kahuna.
All right. Does
Thanks,
anybody
Dylan.
else any other comments?
Are you guys working in if we need to call Julie, she's in the administrative office.
Our gang.
This gang is there?
Billy, Meg, Julie, and I have been there every day since March 13th, pretty much.
That's awesome.
We never went home. And we sent everybody else home, but we didn't go home. So if one of us gets sick, we're all getting sick.
I think the only thing that I would like to say is that I know that, especially in these times of uncertainty, a lot of work went into tonight's presentation and just the health and safety plan as a whole. And so I think that it was really important to get that information out to parents. And I think that it was, and I'm very, and I know the rest of the board is as well, very appreciative of the amount of work and the time that everyone put into this, so that at least parents can, if it's not going to be perfect because things are changing on the hourly basis, but at least they can begin to plan for what August 31st is going to look like for their families. So thank you to you and all of the staff for putting in all this time.
It's been the worst summer ever. But we can get school started and get kids where they need to be and get parents happy with where they're placed and why, then it'll all be worth it, I hope so.
I just want to throw this out to Corey. I love seeing everybody, but if you want to do these meetings by Zoom, I'm good with that.
We'll work on it.
Maybe
We'll
some
get
people-
better at
maybe
this.
some people can go to-
But that's it.
Yeah,
If-
we'll
if
run a
some people
hybrid.
can do it from home.
Yep.
We have room for some,
Yep.
but we don't have room for all 9 of you to Zoom from the office per se,
If that's your preferred
because there's
method,
18 seats. So if you went every other seat, then there wouldn't be room for the
Yeah,
rest of us to help you
totally
when anything
agree.
goes wrong.
Totally agree. We'll run
Unless
some
I don't know where we'd be hiding.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Originally it was Zoom, so.
Yeah. But if we end up Zooming next month and you want to come to the DO, just let Julie know, and we'll set up a laptop, a Chromebook for whomever wants to come. Okay.
Great. All right. Anything else? Good? Yeah. All right. Announcements meeting, quick. Well, now our meeting schedule, we're going to be planning on meeting on August 6th and August 13th. In August, coming up, there'll be, well, maybe, subject to change depending on how things go for voting meetings, correct. And and they'll be held potentially via Zoom, potentially both with in person in the DO. But under the governor's orders now, with under 25, the public will have to be streaming through YouTube unless that changes. And then we'll make changes accordingly to our meeting as well. So at this point, now may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Thanks for your time, everybody.